And we are live. Can you see it on your screen?
Let me see. Yes. All right, we're good to go. You ready then?
Yes, I am here. And welcome everybody to another live stream. It's been a while since we had one, but it seemed like it was an appropriate time to do it. There are a lot of people investigating the early church's writings right now. Because it's available now. Anybody can read the fathers. A lot of people are joining the Catholics and Orthodox, and we are here to tell you what the Catholics and Orthodox really believe, and to show you that it's not what the early church taught from the beginning. You guys can see we have a lot of materials on the YouTube channel. Nolan has put in a lot of work making videos on a lot of important subjects that are not covered in the common YouTube sphere. But we also have a website that some of you may not be aware of, and we're hoping that you'll see the resources on that website. There's especially one on the subject of the heresies of the Catholics and Orthodox, and we show you just reams and reams of quotations or excerpts from the church fathers. We don't call them quotes because most people, when they do quotes, they do like one little sentence or two little sentences, and that's not really what we do with our excerpts from the fathers. When we're extracting text from them, we're posting massive context. When we say that the Catholics are heretical, we don't mean that we found one little sentence or two little sentences from a church father. The church fathers write at length against the Catholics, as we call it. And we're accepting challenges right now. If anybody would like to join and talk to us about the heresies of the Catholics and Orthodox, then you're welcome to join, and we'll be gentle with you. We're not out here to bully or be overly harsh with anybody who's genuinely seeking. But we're willing to meet the challenge if anybody does want to come at us with all their force, all their passion. Then come on at us, and we're up to the challenge.
We'll have to see, though. I mean, this is the first live stream, of course, so there might not be that many, but we'll see. We'll be hanging around for a little bit here. In the meantime, though, just to add on what you were saying a moment ago there, the channel so far has kind of been focused on various different things, and the kind of videos that have been produced so far are really good, and I'm happy with all of them. However, this stream, of course, is a little bit more polemical in nature, very targeted against the Catholics and the Orthodox sect. And we haven't made a lot of videos yet on the channel publicly that are really about that kind of a topic. So, yeah, because some people in the past, like when we were especially going after David Berceau, which is something that we were doing the past couple of years, really devoting a lot of the channel to infant baptism, for example, and going against the Anabaptists, David Berceau thought that we were Orthodox, actually. And so we are not Orthodox, we have to say. We are definitely not Orthodox. And also adding to what you said a moment ago, Luke, about the quotes. The other thing, too, is that people will also quote mine is the thing. And a lot of people will accuse us of doing that exact same thing. However, Luke and I, about 10 years ago now, diligently started reading the church fathers together. And we just wanted to believe whatever was believed from the beginning. In fact, that's what the Orthodox and the Catholics tell you to do, to decide between the two parties and see who is correct, of course. And so most of the stuff that we have on the website is stuff that we've read for ourselves. This is stuff that we're not just extrapolating from various places or trying to just pointlessly build an argument against a pre-decided enemy as if there was some sort of conclusion that we were already approaching the matter with. We had some sort of preconceived notion or something like that. Luke and I have abandoned everything. I mean, so many things that we believed before. I can't tell you how many things, from small to big. And so we definitely didn't go in with any preconceived notions. And we did very quickly realize that a lot of the things that the Catholics and the Orthodox, some of the things that the Catholics and the Orthodox teach are correct, are in line. As if I'm saying correct according to my own standard or anything like that, I should just say they are in agreement in various places with the church fathers, right? Such as baptism, the Eucharist, some very obvious examples, the Trinity. And of course, as we've said before in some talks, those are things that you can prove very easily with an avalanche of quotes, of excerpts, of overwhelming evidence from the church fathers. But there are other things that they believe nowadays which are not only backed up, they're not backed up by the church fathers, but are actually outright contradicted. And we realize that a subversion has taken place. So our ultimate goal here, really, what we're all about, is to challenge the Cathodox claim, because it is the Cathodox who are the ones proposing a claim, who are making a hypothesis. They've said that they preserve a continuity with the early church. They're the ones that have made that claim. Luke and I have investigated it, and we are thoroughly convinced that they are wrong, that they do not maintain a continuity with the early church. And I'm not talking about small matters like language or something like that changing, like the language you happen to speak during the liturgy, or maybe some in respect to the clothes that you wear change. I'm talking about the doctrines of Christ that are not supposed to be changed in any kind of way. They do not maintain a continuity, a 100% continuity with the church fathers. And the areas where they have contradicted them on are deadly matters, such as the mortal sins, which Luke was getting at a moment ago, which we have on the website there. We have a great big list for the Catholic sect and the Orthodox sect. Crimes such as idolatry, such as blasphemy, adultery, and murder, for example. But I've been talking for a second, Luke, if you want to go ahead.
Well, we've got a few people in here. We have some Anglicans, some Baptists, and then I assume this guy's Orthodox. He says, Raffle, another schismatic group of changelings wearing the flesh of the fathers, who would not even deign you worthy of condemnation. Well, who's wearing the flesh of the fathers? The ones that actually obey the early church fathers, or the ones that say all the church fathers were wrong and they needed to be overridden by their grandchildren, their great grandchildren? Come up here. You're welcome to talk with us. We're going to show you, if you want, I mean, as many heresies as you want. We could give you 30, but you probably don't have time for us to show you 30 or 40 heresies of the Cathodox. Come up here and talk to us about Mary's sins. You know, the church fathers say Mary committed sins. They think that the scriptures record 4 of Mary's sins. Come up here, Mr. Dankster, Dank Martin. Nolan, we have somebody named Neuro Jack. He is inviting us to his podcast. I'm not sure what his denomination is. You want to add him to the stage and find out what he's all about?
Yeah, well, you've got the host capabilities here, so feel free. Go ahead.
All right. Welcome, Neuro Jack. Are you here?
Yeah. Yep. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello. You mind telling us just a little bit about yourself, like your age and what your background is in the Christian sphere?
Yeah, I'm in my 30s and I'm just a general Christian. I grew up Baptist and I would say I'm still seeking the full understanding of what that means. And I think I probably always will be. I kind of agree with Orthodox theology, but I'm not an Orthodox. But I do think that, Christianity to me is more of a personal thing, which is maybe some of my Protestant background. So I'm not sure. I'm mostly just trying to understand where you guys are coming from, because I think you said something like demon blood something, or I don't know. So I'm trying to understand
Yeah,
how
I'll give you a
what your
rundown
where
of it.
your angle is essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, we believe that Christ gave authority to his church, to his wife. Just like in a household, you've got a mom and a dad, and you don't just obey the dad, but you have to obey the mom. You know how dad is usually gone at work and mom stays home and she's really the main authority. That's how the church is. Christ intended for us to obey our mother, the church. And even in the scriptures, it tells us we ought to be listening to the consensus of all the bishops in the world, starting in the earliest period of the church, the faith that was once for all handed down to the saints. We could show you that in scripture. We've made some videos on that subject where the scriptures command us to listen to those early bishops, especially to their consensus, and to reject the teachings of one bishop who contradicts all the rest. That's a really important foundation for you to have, is to know that God really gave us a church to obey. It's not just the scriptures alone, and it's not just any church that we choose today to be our authority, but God already gave us an authority. And if you're not aware of the heresies of the Catholics and Orthodox, then that's very important for you to know so that you're not tricked by their
Sure. Okay.
clever arguments.
Sure. Yeah, and I would love to know more of what you mean, because, like, in a sense, I already can understand and agree in in a sense of what you're saying, but I think the specifics of obviously where, not only you and I, but all of us will probably disagree on some level, right? So, for example, right, Catholic and Orthodox are pretty broad categories, right? And so, but for example, I have heard people who allege to be Orthodox say something, including Jay Dyer, and I don't want to misquote him, but based on my memory, he said something to the effect of, well, a bishop can override, hierarchies or councils or something, but not a heretical one or something. So, there everybody seems to twist seemingly things to their favor for
It's
whatever
not that complicated.
purpose they're
It's
doing.
very
Right.
simple.
So
They've made it really complicated. Have you ever heard of the Vincentian canon? That's what they call it. It's just what Vincent of Lerins sums up as that guiding principle for how to know that you have the truth and that you're not in a heretical sect. It's by Vincent of Lerins. I could read it live. In fact, that'd be very important.
no, I've never heard of it, but it sounds like it would be foundational to what you're arguing. So let's hear
It
it.
will. It'll change your life. Here, let me give it to you here. 1 second. We're going to share screens. I'm going to share my entire screen.
Yeah, and just so you know, like I covered this kind of stuff for a long time. Like I've made enemies of a lot of other Christians, I would say, including a lot of Orthodox. So I'm just coming in to understand because it seems that what you're saying is very similar to like what in fact other Orthodox have said about other Orthodox. Like I don't know if you've heard of true Orthodoxy, but there's this
Of
whole
course.
like internal strife. So
Yeah, but
yeah, I'm kind of curious as to what you're
that's
saying. So
that's something we could talk about, but just briefly, since you bring it up, we consider it totally satanic that they would fight over something like a calendar and neglect much greater issues that the church would excommunicate you over, such as murder, idolatry, blasphemy, simony.
And again, I'm not true Orthodox. I do have friends who say they're Orthodox and also true Orthodox, but I think it's much more than that. I mean, specifically, like when it comes to like, what's the idea of a just war? What's the idea of, like for example, like I guess one of the arguments that I've heard people say is like, well, world orthodoxy or this general orthodoxy is kind of like made deals with like, bloodthirsty communist or something. And,
We
and
can get
again,
into
I'm
that.
not saying 100 right.
We
So
can
so
get
I'm
into
just
that.
saying like I think the calendar thing, even if you think that's silly, there is definitely more than that. But yeah, I just want to make sure that's clear. But yeah, go ahead. Let's
I
continue.
think there's a principle that Christ gives us that we need to start with the big issues, and we cannot start with straining at gnats. We have to start with the camels. So this is a very famous video. In fact, I've met people personally who watched this video by Josiah Trenum, and they became Orthodox after they watched this series called Rock and Sand. It's actually it's like a summary of his book called Rock and Sand. So go ahead and listen to what Josiah Trenum says is their guiding principle for how to know that you have the truth and that you're in the true church.
Sound isn't working, I don't think.
No audio?
Yeah, no audio.
Oh, I gotta add audio. 1 second. 1 second, real quick here.
Yeah, StreamYard is a little strange, so you gotta
All
yeah,
right,
you gotta double check.
Gotta make sure we've got the audio. Oh boy, I might not be ready for that.
It's the gear icon more than likely, Luke.
I think I know what I have to do. 1 second. 1 second, everybody.
I mean, if it's easier, Luke, you could just read Vincent.
I could, but this is what I mean, I can put captions on the screen. How about if I just do that? Sorry, I didn't have the audio ready. Everybody see my screen here? This is what he says. He says, we follow the witness of the church as articulated by St. Vincent of Lerins. He says in his Commonitorium, the way you can know that your faith is the Orthodox faith, it's not by quoting scriptures. Every heretic does that. It's by showing that what you believe has been believed by all people in all places at all times since the time of Christ. That's how you know. It's the test of antiquity and geography. That's how you know, in fact, your faith is the faith once given to the saints. And he did a little bit of a sloppy presentation there, because it's not that we believe that what all people everywhere say is the truth. Rather, we believe that the consensus of the bishops is true. That has
right, yeah, because like what he's saying could lead into perennialism or something like that. So
yes,
yeah,
the scriptures don't say obey everybody in the world. It says obey the bishops. It says that in Hebrews 13. And it says it all throughout the scriptures that, like Ephesians 4, that God gave the bishops, he gave the teachers, the shepherds and teachers, to help us to have
Well,
the unity of the faith and to be protected from
well,
falling into
well,
heresies.
yeah, and I'm not trying to just interject too quickly, but I want to make sure I understand, because clearly the problem of false shepherds and false teachers has always been a problem. I mean, there's people obviously who argue that Paul was a false shepherd. I reject that personally, but I can understand why other people may feel that way, if that makes any sense, right? So from the
Well, that's,
beginning, there's been this problem, right? So
you have to go with what the church taught from the beginning, and you have to go with the succession that the apostles set up, because the apostles didn't just say, here's some teachings of ours, and then they die, and then it's just a complete free-for-all. Anybody can believe what they want. But the apostles actually commanded people to obey their successors, the ones that they set up as bishops around the world. Do you believe that? Are you aware of the fact that the apostles were planting churches and setting up leaders in all the different cities that they preached in?
yeah, but where do you draw this authority?
Well, it's
Like, is
like
this like a
asking,
red letter text, like Jesus said it, therefore it must be true that all the people that he succeeded in lineage
you're
must be
confused.
true? I'm
I
trying
can
to
tell. I can tell
no
you're very
no I'm
confused. Let me
no
clear
I'm
it
just
up for
trying to
you.
understand where you're getting it from. Yeah, like first, second, third. Like what's the level of like prioritization on how you're coming to this conclusion?
Well, it would take a little bit of time to lay it down for you, but I'll do it really fast for you. Really, really fast. Can you see my screen? Okay, I
Yeah,
know this
yeah.
is fast, but
Yeah, and I'm
just
not
keep going
coming at
with
you.
me.
I'm
It's
genuinely
okay.
just trying
It's
to
okay.
understand, because I
I
asked this of Orthodox and Catholics and everybody. I'm trying to understand.
Okay, well, before we go to Vincent Lawrence, we'll lay this down first. Okay, here's a little article on the website called Why We Must Obey Bishops. So, first, we show some scriptures that stress the importance of having an interpreter. Peter says, just as also our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given him, wrote to you, as also in all his letters, speaking of them of these things, in which are some things hard to understand, which the untaught and unstable people distort, as they do also the rest of the scriptures to their own destruction. Wow, what a great passage, because it's telling you the scriptures, contrary to what Protestants say, are not easy to understand. There are some things in the scriptures hard to understand. And people who have never been taught, people who have never been discipled, are the ones who end up misinterpreting those passages. And also, he says they're untaught and unstable. That's just a word
Right.
that means they're not on a strong
But
foundation.
yeah, and I'm not trying to interrupt you, but I mean, even within the context of the Bible, the disciples of Jesus had to rebuke them multiple times for like not understanding what he's teaching them, right? So even there, in the time of his own
When?
life, he had this
When did
problem.
Jesus do that? You're talking about when they were catechumens?
I mean, did he not say did he not say something to the effect of like, how little have you learned that you're
When they were
posing this question to
catechumens?
me or whatever?
When they were catechumens before the resurrection, before he completed all their
Okay,
training.
yeah, exactly, right. Okay, yeah, I get it,
If you were
right.
to say something
Yeah.
like that, that is crazy. I mean, at that point, you're just not only attacking the church fathers, you're saying we shouldn't even trust the
I'm
apostles. Is
not
that really what
how
you're
is it
suggesting?
attacking them? But I'm saying you understand where I'm saying is like,
No, I
because
don't.
it's calling
What are
to
you
the
saying?
question. No, well, um it's calling into question what's a true teacher or not a true teacher, and how you
If the
know the difference,
apostles
right?
aren't true teachers, who is? I'm telling you that you should
Oh,
listen to the people that the
I'm not
apostles.
saying they are, right?
I'm telling you,
I'm not saying they're not, right? But I'm just
the
saying, like, how
scriptures
do you
tell you.
know?
Well, I'm going to show you. The scriptures tell you have to obey the successors of the apostles. I'm going to show you if you haven't seen the scriptures. But you
Yeah,
said, well,
let's
even
get into it. Yeah.
your response to that was even the apostles make mistakes and get stuff wrong. So if you're at that point, that you're hopeless.
During, like, as you just said, during their what you would say catechumens period, right? So
Yeah, the apostles did not put
right,
catechumens in charge of the church, so I don't see why that would be relevant.
right. But like even on the night of his death, these people like rejected him 3 times, right?
That was
So I'm
before
just
they were
saying,
put in charge of the church. That was
yeah, I
yeah.
understand that. I'm just saying, like, I'm just trying to, again, from the point of view of somebody who's going to come at you. These are the things that people who have read the Bible are going to say to you, right? I'm not saying that I believe this. I'm saying this is the argument that you're going to hear, right? So I'm just trying
Do you
to
believe any of the
play devil's advocate
apostles
with you.
do you think any apostle besides Judas was an apostate?
Me personally, I don't have any reason to believe that. No, but I'm just pointing out to you the argument that is going to come at you if you're trying to make a rational, logical argument, right?
Well,
So
we believe the tradition of the church on many different issues, and one of them is that all the apostles are righteous men. They all died as martyrs. They did go out and preach the gospel just like Christ commanded them to. You do believe Christ commanded the apostles to go and teach, right?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, we wouldn't be here if that weren't the case.
Yes. So my emphasis, if you will just accept that the apostles really do have authority over us, my emphasis is the scriptures are hard to understand. They're not easy. The Protestants are delusional to say, I'll just pick up the Bible and read it. They know that people are going to misunderstand it. The scriptures tell you that it's hard to understand it. And the scriptures tell you that untaught people are the ones who misunderstand it. You can look up that Greek word. It's the word math. It's where we get the word mathematics. It just means to learn something. It's somebody who has not been instructed. And you know that all throughout scriptures, you have things like in the book of Acts, where Philip sees the Ethiopian eunuch, he sees him reading, he says, do you understand what you're reading? And he says, how could I unless someone guides me? See, that's written for our benefit. We would understand a guide is ordained by God. God wants us to have guides. In the scriptures, let me just skip a bunch of passages and we'll just go right to Ephesians 4. But it says, God is the one, Jesus gave some as apostles, some as prophets, some as evangelists, and some as shepherds and teachers. That's referring to the bishops. We can prove that for the equipping of the saints for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith. So that's the goal, that we all be united in beliefs, and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. Wow, that's a lot of maturity. And he says, as a result of what? As a result of what? Having bishops. We are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of man, by craftiness in deceitful scheming. He says, if we have bishops, if we have these teachers, the evangelists, the apostles, the shepherds and teachers, then we'll all attain to the unity of the faith. Well, guess what? If you read the church fathers, you're going to find out that they did have the unity of the faith on virtually every topic you could ever think of, from small to great. And we don't believe that Satan could have ever accomplished that. Satan is not the one who makes people agree on all these doctrines. Satan is the one who causes division. That's why the apostles are always warning people to be careful not to have factions and divisions, but to be united and to have the same mind.
Right. Okay. So I accept your first premise now. Based on what you're saying, I can accept your first premise. So to the second premise, how do you determine which has the true apostolic succession and those who do not? Because clearly we wouldn't be in this situation if there weren't false
You're right.
teachers. So what's the litmus test that we apply to
That's a
know
great
that?
question. That is the most important question any of us could possibly ask in our entire lives. It is, how do we know that we believe the truth? How do we know that we have the truth and we're not being deluded or deceived? Because many false teachers have gone out in the world, as the scriptures say. So how do we know who's teaching the truth? And we know the unity of the faith is something that we're supposed to cleave to, especially that early unity. We know that many factions have arisen since then. So the principle is that we're supposed to go back to the faith that was once for all handed down to the saints. That's what the scriptures say. It was complete. It was once for all handed down. Didn't have to be partially handed down over time in bits and pieces. It was complete.
Sure. And not to skip ahead too far, but are you saying that there are no currently living bishops that we can trust currently, or and I'm just asking, just skip ahead, is like, because obviously if there's a succession of this person taught this person, this person taught this person, would you
We're
say
not
that
aware of
today there
any.
is any?
We're
Okay,
not
got it.
aware of
Okay, cool.
any.
I just want to.
But
Okay, cool. Okay, great.
We
understand.
say
That's all I wanted
let
to know.
them
Yeah.
we say let them present themselves, let them prove it.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I can kind of rock with that, tentatively, at least from what you're saying. Okay. Let's continue with the premise.
Yes, it's up to them to prove it. We're not going to say it's completely and utterly impossible, but you have to start with this principle first. You cannot start with the principle of the Catholics and Orthodox when they say, well, there has to be a church here, because that doesn't even help you. You have multiple churches claiming to be the true church. You have to start with some other principle that will guide you to the truth. And then you say, which of you current churches matches the early church? That's what you have to do. Okay. The scriptures are pretty clear on this. You should read this document. You should see how many times Paul commands people to obey the people he's putting in charge, like Timothy and Titus. There's no way you think Timothy and Titus are the only people that the apostles ever put in charge and gave all authority to, where he says things like, remain on at Ephesus so that you may instruct certain men not to teach strange doctrines. He says to Timothy, keep commanding and teaching these things. And he says, till I come, give attention to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. And he says, teach what accords. This is to Titus. Teach what accords with sound doctrine, declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you. He says the same thing to Timothy. Let no one disregard you. All authority he's giving them. Do you see that? And it's for the purpose of protecting people from false doctrine. And then he doesn't only just say, you guys teach, he says, entrust these things to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. He says, I left you there to make bishops. He says, if anybody aspires to the office of bishop, he has to be able to teach, he has to be able to manage his own household. He gives all these criteria because they're supposed to be setting up a succession of teachers. They're not just supposed to abandon everybody. Okay, we'll let that point suffice for now. You're asking for the guiding principle to know for sure that a teacher is teaching the truth. How do you know which bishops are teaching the truth and which bishops are teaching falsehood? Is that the right question you're asking?
Yeah, exactly. Like, how would you
Okay.
like? What's the measure of determination? Like,
Okay.
well, and also, yeah, and I think there might be a follow up question, but I'll reserve it
All
for
right.
now. So.
All right. Well, we're in a good spot right now. This is a wonderful place to be. If you accept this principle that we should be going back to the beginning, then you're already almost there, because the Catholics and Orthodox, they make up 2/3 of all Christians in the entire world. And they both say that they're abiding by this principle. They say the early church has to be the true church and that you need to obey the early church. They say that. Catholics and Orthodox. That's their big bragging right. We're the original. We've still got the same liturgy. We've still got all the original doctrines. So all that we have to do is test that to see if it's true. And that's what Vincent of Lerins says in the early 400s. Now, Vincent didn't invent this principle. In fact, you can see on the website, we put tons of excerpts from the fathers. They all say what Vincent says right here. They all say it in so many words. But Vincent does a really great job of just summarizing what all the fathers before him say. And this is what he says. He says, this being the case, he is the true and genuine Catholic who loves the truth of God, who loves the church, who loves the body of Christ, who esteems divine religion and the Catholic faith above everything, above the authority, above the regard, above the genius, above the eloquence, above the philosophy of every man whatsoever, who sets light by all these, and continuing steadfast and established in the faith, resolves that he will believe that and that only which he is sure the Catholic Church has held universally and from ancient time, but that whatsoever new and unheard of doctrine he shall find to have been furtively introduced by some one or another, besides that of all, or contrary to that of all the saints, this he will understand does not pertain to religion, but is permitted as a trial, being instructed especially by the words of the blessed Apostle Paul, who writes thus in the first epistle to the Corinthians: there must be heresies, that they who are approved may be made manifest among you. So he says, that is, that it may be apparent of each individual how tenacious and faithful and steadfast he is in his love of the Catholic faith. So that's the reason God allows heresies. It's to test you. It's to see how much you love the truth. He says, moreover,
Yeah,
in the Catholic...
I would.
Oh,
By the
do you
way, I
agree with
would
that?
generally agree with that. Yeah, I would generally agree with that. Let's continue. Yeah.
Excellent. He says, moreover, in the Catholic Church itself, all possible care must be taken that we hold that faith which has been believed everywhere, always by all. For that is truly, in the strictest sense, Catholic, which, as the name itself and the reason of the thing declare, comprehends all universally. This rule we shall observe if we follow universality, antiquity, and consensus. So he's going to define these 3 rules that make up the whole philosophy of how to know you've got the truth.
Right.
He
And
says,
just really quick, I want
yes,
to ask you a question, because this may or may not be related, and this may sound like a trap, and hopefully you don't perceive it as that. What do you think that the idea of logos pragmaticos is a valid concept?
Logos what?
Logos pragmaticos,
What is that?
meaning that within all traditions you're going to see hints of Christianity shining through, pointing that Christianity is true, essentially.
It's kind of a useless principle. I've never heard of a heretical sect that only taught falsehood. There's always truth in every heretical sect, but that doesn't mean they
Okay,
continue.
cool. Right, but so yeah, so what I mean is that obviously we're Christians because we think it's the culmination of truth, right? So when I, like, for example, when I learned about Hinduism or something, right? Like, I see that there's a lot of things that point back to Christianity, in my opinion, right? Now, is that a bias? People will say, well, that's a confirmation bias, or you're a zealot, or you're crazy,
What's the
or
point, Jay?
whatever, right?
What's the point?
Right. But I mean, it seems kind of what he's saying here, right? Like, he's kind of pointing to that. He's like, well, in the Catholic Church itself, all possible care must be taken that we hold that faith which has been believed everywhere, always, by all.
Only in the church.
I
He's
mean,
not talking about all religions.
okay. And then for that is truly, in the strictest sense, Catholic, which, as the name itself and the reason of the thing declare, comprehends all universality, right? Or universally, right?
He's
But
talking about the church, though, not other religions.
Catholic means universal, meaning, like, ultimately everyone either ought to be or and I mean, again, in a mystical sense, right?
Jack,
We're
Jack, let's
all
keep reading.
no, no,
There's no point
no,
in
no,
saying
no,
all
no.
this.
This is important. No, this is extremely important. Let me explain why. Right?
Try to say it quickly.
Like, well, I mean, just chill off for a second, because like, here's what I'm trying to. This is like the whole basis of the faith, right? That I'm trying to get at. The whole basis of the faith is that in the end of time, God is trying to reconcile everyone back onto Him. Would you disagree with that?
I agree, but what is the point, Jack? We were in the middle of reading something, and you're going off on some tangent.
Oh, I'm sorry that the entire point of the faith is like not relevant to your point you're making. I don't understand why
Your brain is
what the
falling out of
problem
your
is.
head right now. You don't want me to continue reading this principle? You
No,
don't
I
know the
do.
principle.
I'm
How
just
do you know
saying
that you have the truth?
well, the
Let's
ultimate
finish the
truth is that
principle.
God wants us. Hold
What's
on.
the method?
The entire point of the faith is that God wants to bring everyone back to Him, right?
Yeah, and we're trying to figure out the method to know
Okay.
that you don't have heresies, you don't have false doctrines. Do you know what that
Right,
method is that God
but I'm
uses?
also saying that like this little thing that you have highlighted, I'm reading it and I'm trying to understand and
Well, he's
interpret
about
what
to
he
explain it.
means
He's about
ultimately.
to. Let's keep
What he
reading.
means,
He's
right?
going to
Yeah.
explain. He says,
Okay.
"We shall follow
Sure. Okay. Let's
universality
go.
if we confess that one faith to be true, which the whole church throughout the whole world confesses, and we shall follow antiquity if we in no way
Hold
depart
on,
from
but
those."
hold on.
Yes,
Again, this word universality. What does that mean?
I'll
That's what
explain
I'm
it
trying
to
to
you.
get at.
I'll explain to you. Universality is about geography. He is talking about locations around the world. He's not talking about number of people who believe something, but rather just the belief being found all
How
over.
do you know that's what he means though? Because I don't see the definition like footnoted or something. So how do you know that's what he means?
Because the church had this belief that there were five locations on the earth that were spread apart, and four of them were kind
Yeah,
of. Let me
yeah,
explain
I
it to you.
understand that, but no, but like, but
Do you
there's
know the
also
pentarchy?
hold.
Do you-
Wait a second. There's also a mystical church, though, right?
yes.
Okay, so how can he not mean that as well when he says universality, right? Wouldn't he
And what,
mean
and what
both
do you mean by mystical?
heavenly and earthly, right?
No,
The
he is talking.
distinction is irrelevant because we're talking about a testimony from the past that we can review and we can
Yeah,
examine.
but he just said it's based on geography, and I'm saying like it's both, right? I'm just saying that's important distinction in my opinion, right? I'm not trying to like
The
catch you up or
distinction
like say that you're wrong. I'm just saying like it's important to note that he's referring to two forms of the church simultaneously, in my opinion.
You're telling me we can look at some mystical body somewhere and verify that we have the truth by doing that? What are you talking about?
Meaning that we don't ultimately know who's a part of the church and who's not, right?
Well, he's talking about what you can know, though. So what you're saying is useless. He's saying you can go verify that you have the truth by abiding by these three principles. You go and check to see what the beliefs were all around the world, talking geography wise. And then he says also checking antiquity. That means going back to the original interpretations that were notoriously held by our holy ancestors and fathers. And he says, and you shall follow consensus in like manner if in antiquity itself we adhere to the consentient definitions and determinations of all, or at least of almost all priests and doctors. So those are the three principles. We don't just say, look, I found a bunch of bishops in the region of Rome. I found 10 bishops in Rome that say this. He says, no. You need to show that this is believed in all the four corners of the earth, at least the civilized world, which is around that
Sure,
Mediterranean region.
but clearly there's going to be some level of at least transliteration or something like that that's going to have to occur between all these different people with different languages and different ways of speaking and different ways
Well,
of
let me help you
communicating and
understand
stuff,
something.
right? So
Let me help you understand something, Jack. God worked it out so that just before his Christ came, the whole earth was united in one language, the Greek language, because Alexander the Great conquered the world and he established Greek rulers in all the cities that used to be, either Egyptian or, Roman. Greek became the standard language all around the world. Even in Israel, there were a lot of people speaking Greek. So God made it so that the writings would mostly be in the Greek language. There are very few Latin writings from
sure,
the church
but
fathers in the
he
first
also
centuries.
destroyed
Hold on a second.
the Tower of Babylon because everybody
You're
had the same language
can
and
we
dispersed
focus?
everybody as
Can we
well,
please
right?
focus? Let's focus. The church fathers mostly write in Greek. Even Tertullian, who writes in Latin,
Yeah, I agree
mostly
with
writes
you.
in Greek. So yeah, you can actually whatever you're saying about transliteration, that doesn't really matter. We're able to translate Greek into English pretty well,
Okay,
actually.
so I'm just trying to understand your argument. So your argument is like, although God dispersed everybody from the Tower of Babylon and speaking one language, now He gave us a universal language, and so we need to see through the lens of Greek and Greek alone in order to fully understand and comprehend
No,
these
I'm saying
things.
we're able to
no
translate these writings.
Yeah, we're able to understand the language, is what he's saying.
Well, you have to transliterate it. It's not going to be translated alone. It's going to be transliterated,
Do
right?
you know what transliteration means?
Can you define that?
Yeah. Do you
What is
know what it means?
transliteration? Yeah, I do. I'm shocked that you're saying transliterate. Do you know what that word means?
Yeah. Do you want me to go look it up and read it to you?
I want you to just give me a basic rundown of it. I can tell you.
All right. If you want to tell me what you think it is, I'll listen, or I can
Oh
look
my
it up
goodness,
either
Jack.
way.
Jack, I'm starting to think you're like some really low IQ person. Maybe
Because
we
I
should
wanted to find the
we can
terms
keep
that we're
moving.
using.
Transliteration
Transliteration
is
is
when
the
you
process of converting text from one writing system or alphabet into another based on phonetic similarity.
Yes,
transliteration
you're
has nothing to
recreating the
do.
sound, but that's hardly, from reading the church fathers, that's hardly ever done in their writings. You could give
Well,
like the example of like logos, for example, but we still know what logos means.
we don't need to transliterate Greek. We don't need to all speak the Greek language. We can translate it into English, our own language. Transliteration is when you're trying to speak Greek. We're not trying to speak Greek. We're translating
Yeah.
into English.
Right, but you're saying that we have to fully comprehend the fullness and the depth of Greek in order to understand what's being said in Greek and
We'd
then
better
speak it in
understand
English,
it.
right?
We'd better understand it pretty well, at
Right.
least in our own language. Do you believe it's possible to translate the scriptures into English
Yeah, but
pretty
how?
accurately?
But here's the problem. How many modern people, including Christians, can do that?
You're
It's
Can
painful,
misunderstanding
can
Jack.
fully
what
can
Luke is
fully
saying.
verify for? No, but no, I'm not. I'm saying how
I
can
know
the
what Luke
average
is saying,
person fully verify Greek
but
and
that's
the
not what he
Greek
was saying.
interpretations?
Let me explain. You were saying, how
Because
can
we'd have
we?
to take it on faith that it's been handed down to us in English properly, right?
No, you don't, because you can verify it yourself. We have interlinears available for all people. You're living in the 21st century. So if you have a doubt that something's not translated correctly, you can go verify. Anybody can. Let's
I
keep reading. Let's
mean,
finish the Vincentian canon. Let's keep reading.
the entire Old Testament and New
I'm
Testament,
going to
we
give
can
you the
fully
principle,
understand how
and
to
Jack, with all due
do
respect, it's
that.
not all just about you here. This is a live stream, so people can understand the principle of how they know for
Yeah,
sure that
that
English.
why do you think I'm asking these questions? Because these are the questions that need to be asked for the audience, not just for myself, right?
Well, to be fair, I mean, we're indulging in it because it is good to go over the principles here, but some of these principles here are already going to be agreed upon with the main people that we intend to have the discussion with. I mean, it's not that we can't go through the conversation to lay them out, but a lot of these things are already going to
Right,
be
but if you're
accepted when
saying
we're
that
speaking
like
with Catholics and Orthodox.
99.9% of all Christians are in heresy, like it should be extremely thorough and easy to understand, right? So that's why I'm trying to understand it because
Well,
I've
I
never
have
Okay,
heard
some
this
notes
hold
here.
before.
on, Luke. I don't think you're getting what I'm saying here. I'm saying that we already have something agreed upon. For example, the rule that Vincent lays out. That's something that I've already got going on when I speak to like an Orthodox, for example. I don't have to go over the authority of the church fathers with them. You, though, you're talking about Hinduism, you're talking about whether the apostles are
Well,
reliable or not.
obviously, somewhere along
We're
the
starting at
way,
square one.
some of the no, yeah, but some
You
of
want
the
me to teach
somewhere
you
along
also
the
why Genesis is scientific fact? I mean, like, how far back do we have to go? Is my
no,
point.
but somewhere along the way, referring back to church fathers is not possible because somewhere along the way, somebody calls a church father is a heretic. Correct or incorrect?
Let's finish what he actually says here because he addresses that. Okay. Here's Vincent. He says, "What then will a Catholic Christian do if a small portion of the church have cut itself off from the communion of the universal faith?" So, isn't that what you were just asking? You said, "What if some of the church fathers are heretics?" He says, "What surely should we do but prefer the soundness of the whole body to the unsoundness of a pestilent and corrupt member? But what if some novel contagion, he's saying some new sickness, should seek to infect not merely an insignificant portion of the church, but the whole church? Then it will be his care. He's saying it's your care, Jack, everybody's care, to cleave to antiquity, which at this day cannot possibly be seduced by any fraud of novelty." So can you summarize what he just said?
Yeah,
I'll do it
let
for you.
me make sure yeah. Well, let me do it. Okay. What surely but
You're
prefer the
just
sound
reading
of
it. I was
okay.
asking you to summarize it. You're just reading it.
Well, I'm rereading it to make sure I understand. Like, don't chimp out, okay?
You're not even reading it. You're just sitting there silently. So you're a Protestant. You're part of some Protestant sect. I
No,
get
I'm
it.
not actually. I'm not a part of any church. So
But you're not even reading it. What are you doing right now, Jack? I'll summarize it for you. He is saying if one part of the church falls into heresy, if one bishop falls away, you're supposed to stick with what all the rest of them, the whole majority, taught, and you're supposed to go back to the oldest teaching in the church. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
but when you say majority though, okay, now you're making it seem like it's like a democratically elected republic where people are going to go and like debate things and come like a council, right? So like, are you saying that the councils are what verify everything, or
No, let
No.
me lay it out for you. So the
okay, okay,
apostles, they went all around the world preaching. Are you aware of that? And they set up a bishops in all the cities that they preached in. Are you aware of that?
yeah, I've read Paul, so of
Okay,
course,
so we know the apostles are setting up bishops. So if they're teaching the bishops, they're giving them the original teachings of Christ and they're saying, hold to these things. Make sure you teach your successors these same things. Make sure nobody adds or takes away from the things that we're teaching you. So that means if one person falls away from the faith, if one bishop starts teaching something wrong, they don't need to have a council to hash out what's true because they already know what's true. It was passed down to them from the apostles. Instead, their job is just to excommunicate that guy who contradicts what everybody else teaches. All that they really have to do is verify this guy is teaching something different from what everybody else is teaching. Does that make sense?
okay, sure, sure, yeah, it totally makes sense, and I basically 100% agree. The only thing I'm trying to get at is like, can you pinpoint the exact time that the first heresy began within this
Why are you asking that question?
situation, or
Why does that matter?
how would that not be relevant?
Well, Simon Magus is the father of heretics, and they kicked him out of the church. But what's the point of your question?
Okay, so he was the first. Okay, that's a very interesting and probably very salient point since all the occultists love Simon Magus. But okay,
Yes. Here, we'll read the last part. He says, but what if in antiquity itself there should be found error on the part of 2 or 3 men, or at any rate of a city or even of a province? Kind of reminds me of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church. He says, then it will be his care by all means to prefer the decrees, if such there be, meaning there's not always decrees, of an ancient general council to the rashness and ignorance of a few. But what if some error should spring up on which no such decree is found to bear? So he's saying, what should we do if there's no council? This frequently comes up where the Catholics will talk to us and say, our councils overrule you, or this or that. Or sometimes we'll bring up something that their councils never talk about, and they'll say like, the church fathers, or the councils never talk about veiling, so that's how we know it's not an important issue. But see, Vincent says even if it's something that the councils don't mention, it is still an important issue if you can find all the church fathers teaching on that issue. He says, what if you can find an issue, an error which springs up and no council speaks on the issue? He says, then he, the Christian, must collate and consult and interrogate the opinions of the ancients. That means he's supposed to collect all the writings of the church fathers, of those, namely, who, though living in various times and places, yet continuing in the communion and faith of the one Catholic Church, stand forth acknowledged and approved authorities. And whatsoever he shall ascertain to have been held, written, taught, not by 1 or 2 of these only, but by all equally, with one consent, openly, frequently, persistently, that he must understand that he himself also is to believe without any doubt or hesitation. This is the principle that we abide by, Jack. Is it starting to crystallize for you?
yeah, it is. So when you say the Orthodox, so you're saying that Eastern Orthodoxy and also Western Rite, true Orthodoxy, somewhere went astray, and can you trace exactly where that happened at, or
Well, instead of doing that as if there was some one time in history where it all happened at once, which we don't even believe, rather we do it on a doctrine by doctrine basis, and that's all anybody can do. You cannot just say, we're gonna say, like, this church father always teaches the truth or something, and I like this church father better than that church father, because these doctrines are becoming corrupted at different time periods. Some take longer than others. So rather, what we ought to do is follow the principle. First, we start in the very beginning of history, and if we want to know what the truth is on a doctrine like faith and works, or baptism, or the Eucharist, or the divinity of Christ, we go and see what all the fathers taught from the beginning, and we work our way forward in history. And you will eventually come to a point where they're going to teach something that contradicts all the rest on certain issues. On some issues, the Catholics and Orthodox do still teach what the early church taught on issues like the Eucharist or the divinity of Christ or baptism. But on other things, they completely contradict what the early church taught. So we have to do it on a doctrine by doctrine basis.
sure, yeah, that's fair, yeah, that's fair, and yeah, and that part I totally can understand where you're coming from and agree. So the question I would ask you next is: do you think that there's a gradation to heresy, or is it a heresy is a heresy?
Not
I mean,
Well,
you're collectivizing Catholic and Orthodox, so I'm saying, in those general terms, like for example, would you include Judaism as a heresy, or
of course, that's what the scriptures say. It says those who are of the sect. That's the word heresy. The heresy of the Pharisees, the heresy of the Sadducees. So yes, of course, they're heresies.
so Jesus was not a Jew then, correct?
Was Jesus a Pharisee or a Sadducee? No. Was he a Jew? Yes.
Okay.
Not all Jews are Pharisees and
Well, wait,
Sadducees.
wait. What do you mean though? Because
Not
like,
all Jews are Pharisees and Sadducees. You thought
right,
all Jews
but
were either
are you
Pharisees or
sure? Are you sure that? But what the term of a Jew, is that an ethnic thing or a religious thing? Because clearly, if they had a different religion, like clearly Jesus did not have the same belief or faith as a Pharisee or a Sadducee. So calling him a Jew, what is that in reference to?
Why don't we focus on some other more fundamental subject and not about Judaism? The Jews are heretics because they reject Christ and they've added many traditions and they've made many requirements of the law that have either passed away or were never there in the first place. So we are not Jews. We stick with the earliest teaching of the church. And by the way, you do not need to investigate every heresy in the entire world to know that you have the truth. If you were to do that, you'd be investigating heresies for your entire life, actually multiple lifetimes, because there are more heresies than anybody has time to investigate. All that you're required by God to do is to investigate what the church taught from the beginning and to obey the bishops, which the scriptures command you to do. In Hebrews 6, it says, obey those who rule over you. Speaking of the bishops, he says, obey them, for they keep watch over your souls. Those bishops left behind writings. When they taught their congregations, they didn't just do it with their mouths, but they also did it with their pen, just like the apostles did. And the things that they wrote have just as much authority as the things they said out loud, just like with the apostles. In fact, some
Do you
Protestants
do
think
you
that the writings have more authority than what they said with their mouths, which we don't think is true. So if those bishops had authority while they were alive, their writings still have authority when they're dead.
do you think that you can trace back the religion of Christ before his birth?
I don't know what these questions are that you're asking, Jack. Can I ask you a few questions? Do
Sure.
you accept the principles that we've laid down that the early church fathers have authority, or are you still skeptical about that? Do you think that you can
Well,
reject
I never
the
said that I
consensus of
was
the fathers?
skeptical. I was asking
I,
you questions. It
Jack,
doesn't mean I'm
Jack,
skeptical of the
I
claim.
didn't accuse you of that necessarily. I can tell that you do kind of dodge questions, which is why I suspect you are a Protestant. But I've just asked if you accept the principle that the early church fathers' earliest
But wait,
consensus
if you're
has
saying that
authority.
Orthodoxy and Catholicism is not
Oh my goodness, you can't.
the true church, then aren't you a Protestant yourself? Then
No, the accusation against the Catholics and Orthodox is that they are Protestant. They do not obey the early church's teaching. You see, so we are the true
so
Catholics and
what? So
Orthodox.
what? So what? Okay, cool. So what name would you give yourself to? I
You mean
see
like the Tower of Babel?
anti-Nicene.
You mean
Is
like
that
the
what you're
Tower of
getting at?
Babel? We should make a name for ourselves. You're saying we should call ourselves anything other than Christian? No, that's a heresy. The early church condemns that. We are just Christians. We're nothing else. And the name of the channel is not
Right.
a
Well,
name of a
well,
sect.
you asked me. Yeah, but this the thing is, you asked me a question. You said, what is your faith?" And I said, "I'm a Christian." And then now you're asking me, "Well, what denomination or whatever are you?" So I've already answered your question. Correct.
Jack, I did not ask you what your religion was. I asked you about a principle. Do you accept the principle that the early church fathers' unanimous earliest consensus, or their consensus? I didn't want to say
Yes, I
unanimous.
do. I've already
I
said that
haven't
I
even
agree
asked the
with
question, Jack. Jack, I haven't even asked the
general
question.
Orthodox
Are you
theology.
okay,
But
Jack?
yeah,
I
I've
didn't
already
even
said that.
finish the question. Okay,
Right, but
maybe we
I've
should
already
have
answered
somebody
the
up.
question. But go ahead.
We should probably have somebody up. I can't even ask the question. Can you please answer this one question, Jack? Just so I can know who you are. I want to know your heart. I want to know whether you're even listening. Do you believe that the earliest consensus of the church fathers has authority over you? Do you believe you have to obey their consensus, their teaching? Do you believe
If
God
I'm
requires
fully
that?
aware, if I'm fully aware of it, then yes.
You really do from the heart? You're telling me you believe that?
Yeah, but I'm also asking you, where do you draw the line? Because somewhere along that line, there's a line that needs to be drawn. Correct? Like,
Why? Why would we
do
draw a
you
line?
accept?
Do you understand what a philosophy is, what a principle is?
Do you accept everything that Saint Augustine said?
Well, here's the question, Jack. You're asking good questions. Does Augustine's teachings, do any of his teachings contradict the earliest consensus of the church? That's the only question we need to ask. Because I
Some
don't
people
start
say
with Augustine.
yes, and some
Jack, I
people
don't.
say that Saint. Some people say yes.
I don't start with Augustine, though. You're starting in the 400s, okay? We start in the beginning. Do you start in the beginning?
Where else could I begin?
Well, wonderful. You're asking me about Augustine, and our answer is we start in the beginning. We find Augustine actually contradicts what the church fathers taught in the beginning, and we can prove that on a lot of different subjects.
But not on everything.
Yes, not everything, just some things. You want me to give you an
Okay.
example?
So do you think that they should have made him a saint, or is he not a saint?
Well, you're asking questions that they're loaded questions, okay? Making somebody a saint is something that we don't agree with. We don't find that in the early church. You can't just declare that somebody is for sure saved. You don't know that.
Right, but you're also making the claim that we're supposed to follow church fathers and that there's a clear lineage that you can delineate. So, right?
Yes, we have their
But you're not
testimony.
calling them saints, but you're not referring to them as saints. But, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just trying to understand the
Well,
distinction. That's all I'm trying to get.
all Christians are generically referred to as saints in the scriptures. So we don't believe in this idea of officially saying we know for sure this guy's going to be
Right.
saved.
Well, there's
But
Protestants that say that, but then you're calling me a Protestant,
hello.
but
We
you're
do
saying what a
say,
Protestant
oh
say.
my goodness, Jack, just be quiet for a second. We do say that all the church fathers are saints. We do say that. You accused us of saying the church fathers are not saints. We don't say that. We just don't say they're officially all of them confirmed to be in heaven because that's not our job. That's judging. Christ said we shouldn't judge.
Right, but you're saying that they're false teachers.
Who? The church
So how
fathers?
can they be? So how can a false teacher be a saint?
Well, that's up to God. If Augustine wants to contradict all the other church fathers, that's only Augustine that there's a question of, not the
We're
early
all
church fathers.
saints until proven otherwise in heaven. I mean, again, I'm not
Truly,
trying
this
to
man's
misconstrue what you're
brain
saying.
is just like, it's just mush. We're gonna go ahead and kick him because his brain doesn't work. If anybody else would like to come up, you guys are welcome. I'll see if I can fix this screen here. Panonsky says, I have no idea what these guys are. I agree with what I see mostly, but I am a dog, apparently. Panonsky, I don't know who you are. Have we spoken before? Have we said that you're a dog?
He's upset about the Mary worship comment.
Ah, I see. Why don't you come up here and we'll show you what all the church fathers say from the beginning. You
He
can
said
trace.
in the live stream, I don't know, you probably, because you were speaking with that guy, he said that he's commuting. I don't know if he's driving then or what, but he's not able to talk right now.
Well, let's drop the link again. If anybody would like to come in and talk with us, we are willing to talk to you. We will talk to you about any one of these subjects, these heresies of the Orthodox. There are a lot of them. And any one of these, if it can be proven that the whole church unanimously or the consensus condemned a doctrine of the Catholics or Orthodox, then you have to accept that that church, whatever one you're part of, Catholic or Orthodox, does not have apostolic succession. Apostolic succession is not just the preservation of a line of ordinations. Remember, there were heretics. There were men who were ordained as bishops, but then they became heretics. And their line of succession through laying on of hands didn't make them Christians. They were outside of the church if they were excommunicated. In fact, they'd be deposed. If you have false doctrines, you end up getting deposed. Your ordination is not everything. The whole purpose of ordination, the whole purpose of choosing a person to be a leader in the church is so that he will preserve the teachings of the apostles. And if he's not preserving the teachings, then the whole point of apostolic succession has been lost. These Orthodox will say things like, we've got apostolic succession, and they're just talking about some ordination. But then their teachers are totally slandering the early church, condemning the early church's doctrines. And we would say apostolic succession has been lost. And the burden of proof does start with every one of these churches claiming to be the original church. The burden of proof does not start with us that we have to disprove that they're the true church. No, if we're honest seekers, if you're an honest seeker, you want to be saved, then you're going to go find out what the church taught from the beginning. And based on what you find, just like Vincent of Laren says, you're going to cleave to that. And you're going to go look for the church that has the original faith. You're going to join it. You're going to obey that bishop or priest. And you're going to give them your undying loyalty. You're going to be a good child. You're going to obey your mother church. That's what we're doing. The problem is these churches out here do not obey the early church. They are clearly condemning the early church, and the early church condemns them. I can't join a church that's condemned by all the early church fathers, who they hypocritically claim to be their own saints. Oh, he says he's an Orthodog. I get it. We did call him a dog if he's an Orthodog.
You can stop being an Orthodog.
BLX dude, come on, speak to us. We will not be harsh with you. We're not harsh with everybody. We were harsh with Jack a little bit just because he was brainless. I would never go on your podcast, Jack. You're just so stupid. Why don't you learn what the early church fathers teach and obey it? That's all you need to do. You're so distracted with all these bizarre questions. It's a sign of an unhealthy mind, an unsound mind. Here's his comment. So we're all saints, and false teachers aren't saints, but we can know who is and isn't a false teacher, but only God can know that. Am I misconstruing anything? Jack, I mean, what a great example to show how confused you are. Yes, all Christians are generically referred to as saints if they're baptized, but if they have false teachings, then they are a heretic. So that makes them in danger of hellfire. We don't know for sure what's going to happen to them if they have a heresy, but we do know that heresy is a sin, according to Galatians 5. It's a very serious sin. And there are also degrees of heresies. Not all heresy is necessarily a blasphemy. It can be just a false teaching. Like if you say that it's good for men to have long hair, that's a heresy. But there are others that are far worse, something relating to the deity of Christ or some personal insult to God himself. If you deny the deity of Christ, that's a really serious heresy. So we know historically you would get excommunicated for heresies, but a lesser false doctrine, we don't know what's going to happen to somebody if they believe something lesser. If they teach it, they're definitely more condemned. We leave that up to God, though. We pray that God would have mercy on Augustine, but we don't know what's going to happen to him. May God have mercy on Augustine, but he taught a lot of heresies. One of his heresies is that he went against all of the church fathers before him, and he taught that all the theophanies, the appearances of Christ in the Old Testament, which are also called Christophanies, were actually not Christ, but they were actually angels. Now, the church fathers talk about this at great depth, at great length. Even at Augustine's time period, they were talking about it, and they all unanimously said that is really the Son of God appearing in a visible form. And they specifically reject the teaching of the Jews. The Jews were always saying, that's just an angel. And they say these stupid Jews are loony. It says, I have seen God face to face and lived. And he named that place the face of God or form of God. That's what Jacob named it. Or Hagar says, I have seen God. Moses was afraid to look at God, so he turned his face away. We see him in a physical form over and over in the scriptures. But Augustine was a rebel, always disobeying his father's teachings on many subjects. So that's between him and God. May God have mercy on him, but he was a heretic. And not only that, guys, it gets worse. Because just saying, that's wrong. I'm going to disagree with them all. They're all wrong. I'm smarter than everybody. I've got all the knowledge. I've got all the wisdom. That's a pretty severe sin. But the fact that he would actually condemn certain teachings of the early church and call them blasphemy, now that is in a new category. When you're condemning all the early church fathers, you're not just content to be an idiot yourself, but you want to teach the contrary to your congregation and condemn anybody who teaches the original doctrine of the church. Now you're just really you're dead. I'd say you're dead. But may God have mercy on him. No, nobody can be too harsh on Augustine. That's what we believe, because Augustine himself does not restrain himself in harshness toward others. Augustine, for instance, says that all babies are damned to eternal torment in limbo if they're not baptized. That completely contradicted the unanimous teaching of the church for the first 300 years, and even other church fathers who were alive at his time period, like John Chrysostom. So, you can't, if you're going to condemn all babies, if you're going to condemn any innocent baby, don't tell me I'm being too harsh on you if I say that you're condemning yourself. Arma says, the narrow gate to heaven is through Christ, the mother of Christ. Or through Mary, the mother of Christ. I'm sorry, my brain. Why don't you come up and speak to us, Arma? Come up here. Somebody drop the link for him. Keep dropping the link so that they can come in. Here, I'll drop the link for you, Arma. Come up and talk to us. We can show you that the church fathers for the first 450 years of church history unanimously say Mary was guilty of sins. Did you know that? You know, all the church fathers. We'll give you like, let's say 20, 25. We'll give you church fathers. We'll drown you in it. Let's pin this link here so that everybody can use it. Not sure how to pin that link, but I put a star on it. Hopefully that does the trick. And who else? We've got Peter. Peter says, I think it happened between Nicaea and Constantinople, the move to imperial churches. You can see it in the difference in the two creeds. Very stark. Yeah, you didn't, in the Ante-Nicene period, you didn't have emperors appointing men to be bishops. Even if you did, it'd be a horrible perversion of true apostolic succession to have an emperor arbitrarily deposing or appointing somebody to be bishop. An emperor doesn't have that authority. And the Orthodox came up with a doctrine that says not only do they have the authority to appoint and depose bishops whenever they want, but it's actually their right. It's their responsibility to do it. They believe that the emperor is like a mega bishop. Is this not the most hypocritical thing you've ever heard from the Orthodox? That they say, we reject the papacy. We refuse to have one big bishop reigning over us, telling us what we have to believe. You know, anathema to this whole pope idea. Anyway, we've got a great big Eastern emperor over us who convokes councils and tells us what we all have to believe, and he can decide who's going to be a bishop by snapping his fingers. And he can just, appoint John Chrysostom and then depose John Chrysostom and have him executed at the snap of his fingers. It's wonderful. Anyway, no popes. No popes. It's a joke. We're laughing at you, Orthodox. Your emperors are worse than the Pope.
Yeah. Because I always thought of it that way back in the past until I had seriously researched it. And I mean, you figure all that out and everything, and you're like, wow, the Orthodox are actually the less principled here because, they're both doing something not so good, but at the very least, the Catholics want another bishop ruling over them as opposed to an emperor, which makes a lot more sense, honestly.
Yeah, sorry for subjecting you all to that idiot Jack, but at least you got to hear us explain some basic doctrines. You got to hear us lay down the principle. But he sure liked to trail off. What crazy sect is he part of? Who knows? Guys, if you are adhering to the early church's teachings, you're not part of a sect by definition. What you should always say to these Orthodox when they accuse you of being part of some alternate church is this. This is what we say to them. This is the best response. This will get them to shut up and actually discuss the doctrines at hand. You just say, listen, I'm pending joining your church. I want to join your church. I'd love to be part of a great big institutional church. That sounds wonderful. You're telling me there's Christ's church on the earth that has hundreds of millions of members? Count me in. I want to be in that. All I need to do is just verify that you are the original church. Do you teach what the early church fathers all taught from the beginning? If your church does match the early church's teachings, I'm going to join your church. Do you teach what the early church taught? Yes or no? And if they say, oh, yeah, we do. You say, okay, let me show you what I found the church fathers saying. I've been reading them. Help me understand. We recently spoke to two priests. We did this. We said, help us understand what's going on with the early church. They're condemning your church. And these people are just these slippery, slimy little snakes. They're just like, it's like, I don't know, it's like Play-Doh. Like their brains are made of mush. There's nothing there. They don't have any response. They ultimately just say, like, what this one priest goes, listen, this is what we believe. We're not going to change. You either join it or don't. But he didn't want to defend it. He knew that the early church condemned their church. We're not afraid of the Orthodox. We're not afraid of the Catholics. We're inviting you to come up here and expose us. Show that we're misinterpreting the early church. But if you end up admitting that we are adhering to the early church's teachings and that your church is just overriding their teachings, if you're going to go and say that actually the early church is wrong and you're going to completely abandon your initial claim that you are the original church, then you can't condemn us. You can't say we're evil or rebellious or something for obeying the early church fathers. You should actually have more sympathy, if it's really true that the whole church was wrong from the beginning and your church is correct. Have sympathy for those people who are just trying to abide by this principle that Vincent laid down. to investigate the early church and obey their teachings. And we're just so misled. We're so led astray by Vincent, obeying the early church fathers. Of course, that's all ridiculous. If the early church didn't teach the truth, then how can you ever know that any church teaches the truth? Are we just supposed to go with the biggest numbers? Whatever church has the most members, we just join them? Or what? What's the guiding principle? Come up here. Show us that we have misinterpreted the church fathers. Penonsky, when you're done commuting, you should come up here. Where's Arma? Have Arma come up here. We'd love to talk to you, Arma. Sound working? Am I coming through?
Yeah, you're fine.
What does the early church say about abortion? Well, I think you know. You don't even have to ask. You know that is completely forbidden. BLX Dude says, I think you guys should debate with a person called Jay Dyer. He's a very well-spoken figure of orthodoxy. He himself does the open debates on his channel for a long time. Did you hear of him? Yes, we've heard of him. I'm happy to go talk to him. This is our coming out in the open day. We're having a live stream, and whenever Jay is live streaming, we can go speak to him. I don't know what his game is going to be. He's most likely going to say that the church fathers are wrong. It's always multiple stages of the battle in these boss battles when you're having a debate. You know how when you defeat the big boss, you get his health bar down to 0, and then you have the second stage where it grows back and he comes back alive again. That's what it is with all these Orthodox. First, you destroy them in the first round, which is where you say, your church is not the original church. And they'll say, yeah, yes, it is. It is the original church. All of our beliefs are the original church, and you're just misunderstanding them. And then we show, actually, we are interpreting them the same way you do. See, these Orthodox can't even come up with an alternate interpretation because the church fathers' statements are so explicit. And so they die and their health bar grows back and they say, okay, never mind. You are interpreting the church fathers correctly, but the church fathers are wrong. And we say, finally, you're just going to come out and be honest and admit it. You don't respect the early church fathers. You say they're wrong. You are a Protestant. You are a rebel. You do not obey the church's teachings. You've made your own teachings. You made your own church. Thank you. All right, now let's destroy this one too. And we show that the church taught from the beginning that it can't change its beliefs. Even their own councils say that. Go read the Council of Trullo. They say, our decrees add nothing to what the fathers previously decreed, nor do we have any such power. They don't even have the power to add or take away from what was previously decreed. Peanut Gallery, come up here. Yes, you're right. That guy was a yapper. He was a major yapper. Ultra Star Killer asks, thoughts on Oriental Orthodox? Same problems as the Eastern? Yes, they're the same. They're two sisters. And we would say the same about Catholics and Orthodox. Even though the Catholics have surpassed the Orthodox in their worship of Mary, going so far as to call her almighty and things like that, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, they're just two sides of the same coin. They're two harlot sisters. They're daughters of the whore of Babylon. You might say the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon, but in any case, they're all adulterous harlots. The Oriental Orthodox contention with the Eastern is just so laughable. They're fighting about an issue that is just so utterly inconsequential. They both agree that Jesus is fully God, fully divine, and fully man. They believe he had a human and a divine nature. And they're fighting over the specific wording of one tiny issue, whether his human nature was combined with his divine nature. That's what they want to fight about. Are you kidding me? Who cares? Does this really affect my salvation? This is what you should ask them. Can I be saved without knowing the true answer on that subject, this extremely lofty subject of Christ's divinity and exactly how it combined, how it meshed with humanity? Can I be saved without knowing that? And they'll all tell you, yeah, I guess you can. I guess it's not essential. Okay, why don't we stop straining at a gnat, which is the definition of what you're doing, and why don't we focus on essential doctrines like murder, adultery, idolatry, blasphemy, simony. You guys charge for baptisms. You call marriage a sacrament and you charge people money to perform it. Why don't we talk about these massive sins? It's satanic that you're distracting everybody with this discussion about whether Jesus' human and divine natures were combined or remain separate. And what does that even mean? Who cares? Yes, it is satanic. All distracting issues that they bring up, like the filioque, or how many wills he has. 5 of the 7 ecumenical councils, you have to admit, are just a joke. They are discussing the tiniest little details. Was Jesus' soul human or divine? While they're going and committing murder, and there's emperors are destroying apostolic succession and randomly choosing who's going to be bishop and who's not going to be, and executing bishops like John Chrysostom, your wonderful great leader of the Orthodox Church, who we also have great respect for. See, that's not a big issue for you. You're like, yeah, bring on all those emperors, let them rule the churches, let them rule us. And then you're saying, but, we need to fight about whether Jesus' soul was divine or not. Again, we're not denying that there is a correct answer on this. There is a correct answer, but why don't you focus on the important issues? Remember what Clement says in 1 Clement. He says, you are fond of contention, brethren, over issues that do not pertain to salvation. You love to fight about things that don't affect whether you're going to be saved or not. And there are some issues that are way more important than others. You need to put a priority on those. Toronto Bible Study asks, do you believe in once saved, always saved? Why don't you just ask, what did the early church teach? Did the early church teach that once you are cleansed of all your sins and born again, you can never fall away or you can never lose your salvation? Of course, the early church completely rejected that idea. Totally bogus. A lot of the beliefs that are held by Protestants, Calvinists particularly, come from the Gnostics. The Gnostics believed that human beings don't have free will. They believe that human beings are totally depraved as long as they live in the flesh, and that the flesh is completely evil and it can never be tamed to do anything good. And so they said, yes, we're either predestined to destruction or to salvation, and God is completely in control of it, and we can't be good or bad. And the early church considered them fatalists. That's where the Calvinists derive their doctrine, not necessarily from a direct succession, but just demonically. The demons who deluded Simon Magus and his followers also delude the Calvinists. And the scriptures are so clear on salvation. Jack says, is insulting people you don't know Christian awfully?
It's not even
It's
worth it. It lowers, it weakens the audience's ears.
I know. Okay, we're not gonna waste our time. All right, we have somebody who would like to come on. His name's Rich. Rich, we're gonna put you on. Welcome to the stream.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Nice to see you.
Yeah, I just saw your live stream. I'm driving, and I really appreciate what you guys are talking about here. However, my question was, I am very unlearned on the church. I grew up Protestant in the Baptist church, and then I started going to an Orthodox church. But you're right, a lot of the things that the Orthodox church teach, the church fathers clearly do not teach. And so I kind of dropped out of the catechumenate process in the Orthodox church. My wife is still wanting to go to the Orthodox church. I guess my question is, I'm very illiterate on the church fathers. What would you recommend reading? For guy, I'm a truck driver and a farmer. What would you guys recommend reading first on order of importance to get kind of read up quickly?
That's a good question, Rich. It sounds like you're honestly seeking, and it's surprising that you left the Orthodox. That's extremely rare. So may God guide you into the truth, and we're here to help you. You live in a wonderful age. You are in the internet age. It's got a lot of evil stuff on the internet, but it's also a great resource because there are people online,
yes,
not just us, but a lot of other people have collected all the teachings of the church fathers on almost every subject you can think of. And we're also trying to help with that. That's why we made our website. We saw there were a lot of subjects that people had not made readily accessible on the internet, and showing the unanimous teaching of the fathers. And maybe it is somewhere on there, but we never saw it. So we made our website. So you don't have to read all the church fathers to know their teachings. You can simply do a little bit of research on each subject and collect their statements, just like Vincent of Laren says. And you can do that. You know, when Vincent said that, understand the audience he's talking to was pre-internet, but he is saying that that is what all Christians should do. And really, I think he's speaking to us. I think God knew that at the last times you'd have billions of people on the earth, the biggest population the earth ever saw, you know, unless there were more during the flood. But everybody's got access to the internet. Even people in Africa, you know, people can see the internet. They can study, and English is kind of a big universal language now. Most people can get access to English translations of the fathers and the scriptures. So we ought to be doing what Vincent said. It's the obvious thing to do.
It is. Yeah, it is. You're right. And I had never heard of Vincent of Lorenz, I believe, until you guys were talking about him just now. I had never heard that put as succinctly as he puts it, but that the idea makes sense to me.
And the idea is very old. I mean, Vincent, he wrote that a little bit later. I mean, relative to us, he's like ancient, but that principle had been around already for centuries at that point. He just articulates it very well, and a lot of people are already familiar with that passage from him because, again, he articulates it just very well. It's very easy to wrap your mind around. But as far as
you must forgive me, I am very woefully unstudied on the church fathers, and just my Protestant background is to thank for that. I did not study the church fathers when I had more time, and I'm playing catch up now. But so you said you have a website?
Yes, it's all, you know. However, it just depends on what you're comfortable with, like how thorough you can actually be with your time and whatnot. If you want the crash course very quickly, we have already collated everything on the website. And you could get just a very quick, like, flashpoint, just like see what they all say very quickly. Or if you want to do it on your own, a lot of these books are available online for free now. You don't even need to buy a physical copy.
Audiobooks too.
Audiobooks are very popular. Yeah, if you're driving, you know, you said you're a truck driver. If that's easier, if you're able to listen to audiobooks, there's some good audiobooks out there. I would recommend
a lot of stuff is in public domain now, which is nice.
Yes, they are. Unfortunately, though, the stuff that's public domain are older translations, which is a little bit older English. So there's a bit of a learning curve there. There are newer translations within recent decades, which are more modern.
I grew up like reading Shakespeare and stuff, so Old English is not hard for me to wrap my
then perhaps you'd be fine. Yeah, that would be good then. I would recommend to anyone who really wants to get into the church fathers and is very new to all of it, if you really want to get like a quick, because, you know, not all these books that they wrote, I mean, all of them have a very edifying, crucial, important information, but some of the books, of course, were written not with like somebody trying to learn Christianity in mind, like for their first book. I would really recommend, like, if you want to ease into it and get into it, especially with something early, Justin Martyr's Dialogue with Trypho. It's a very engaging, interesting book. It's long, but not, you know, exhaustively like lengthy where it's difficult to listen to or anything. It's a very lively debate back and forth. So it's, you know, there's wit in there. It's between a man named Trypho, who's a Jew, and Justin, who was a Christian. And
Justin,
so he's explaining
the Martyrs,
to him
Dialogue with Trypho. Okay.
Yes. And it creates a great opportunity for Justin to explain the Christian position on a whole plethora of different issues that you could think of, which most people still, most of the things that they discuss in that book, the vast majority of them are still relevant questions that everybody wonders about today. And he explains them very well.
Humanity doesn't change much, you know. We're prone to the same sins now that we were 2,000 years ago. So yeah.
Interesting questions.
Rich, it can be very overwhelming when you're in this spot that we're all in, especially if you're learning it all for the first time. You're wondering, well, what am I supposed to do? That's what they're always asking us. What church am I supposed to go to if what you're saying is true, that the Catholics and Orthodox are in rank heresy? You've already left the Orthodox Church, so you seem to already at least be convicted that you can't be with them, even if you're not sure where you should be. But we can't start with the question of, well, what am I supposed to do if the church is heretical? You can't start with that. You have to first verify whether they're heretical. And then if you're honest with yourself, you'll take honest, counteractions. You can't just ask it rhetorically, though, like, well, if it is heretical, what am I supposed to do? Because you've already got your allegiance to an institution instead of the truth. And you're going to be
that's an interesting point. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
But you'll be assured, and you'll actually be given comfort when you read the church fathers, because they actually do teach it is possible for the church to fall into apostasy. And not only do they say the whole church can fall into apostasy, like we just read Vincent of Lérins saying that if the whole church falls into apostasy, it's your job to collect the church fathers and obey them. I could read it again for you if you like. And we just
I do have a good memory. And when you read that on the stream with the other guy, I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. It made sense. Yeah.
That doctrine of the church's invincibility did not exist for those first few centuries, and especially not at that time. You know why? Because they had just had the Arian crisis. They just saw the whole church fall into apostasy. Remember?
What? I've heard about that. What was that?
It's too much for us to go over on the stream, and there are other people that would like to join the call, but I will just tell you, you're in a good spot with your job. It's not good for you to sit all day. I also have a job where I sit all day. It's not good for the back. I hope you get some exercise, but hey, there is one good aspect of it, and it's that you can listen to audiobooks while you're driving. And I hope
I'm a farmer too, so I get my steps in.
Very good. Very good. Well, stick an earpiece in your ear and listen while you're working. And it's extremely useful. I do it when I'm at work, and my friends do it in their jobs. We're just in a great time period where we got that kind of technology. It's one upside to it. And we can talk with you again. This isn't the last time we'll talk with you. You can leave a comment, and we can give you a link to the Discord. And we have a really wonderful community of people that are all reading the church fathers together. Again, don't be afraid if somebody says, well, where's your church? You should just respond to them. Listen, I will join your church if you can prove it's the original and that your doctrines are not deviations and that you're not condemning the early church. But don't expect me to just join some random church before you prove it's the original.
Okay. That's really good. Thank you. I won't take any of your more time, but I'm going to read that Justin the Martyr. And I'll leave a comment, and I'd love to get in the Discord. It sounds like a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. We could have a call in there too at some point. We'd have more time to talk. So yeah, feel free to join for sure.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your calling in. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll talk to you again soon, Lord willing, Rich.
Thank you.
God be with you.
And with you. Thank you.
And we also have Max. I'm going to add Max to the stage. First, let me respond to this from Ultra Star Killer. He asks, if the whole church falls into apostasy, then does that contradict Jesus? Satan will not prevail against the church? And again, this is
really elevated. Like, this is really just really elevated in intensity here. I mean, we're no longer talking about the gates of Hades. Now we're talking about Satan.
Yeah, they've heard this argument so much. It's like they've reframed it in their mind of what the text actually says. But simply put, Ultra Star Killer, the church fathers do not teach this doctrine that the gates of Hades is referring to, just Satan, that Satan can't prevail against the church. We would have to give you a really brief summary here because we want to get to Max. But the church fathers say the gates of Hades, that's actually a specific location under the earth. It is
true, though, that Satan will not prevail against the church. But in order for you to be the church, you have to overcome Satan.
That means you have to believe the truth. You can't become a heretic. But just to answer your question specifically, the gates of Hades is an actual location underneath the earth. When the souls of people die, they go down into Hades. And Hades, that's just the word that means the place of the dead. It's divided into two portions, which is talked about in Luke, I think 12, where Jesus says there's a rich man, there's Lazarus, and the rich man went into the flames after he died because he was evil. And Lazarus went to the bosom of Abraham. He got to be with the patriarchs and the other righteous saints. The church fathers teach that will continue. That's the destination of all souls of the saints until Jesus returns. This is one of the heresies that the Catholics and Orthodox teach. They teach that Mary is Queen of Heaven. They teach that she is in heaven right now and that all the other saints are in heaven. Total heresy, a complete lie, a complete contradiction of the early church's teaching. So Simply put, when Jesus says, the gates of Hades will not prevail against my church, he's talking about literal gates, which are literally closed over his church, which is in Hades. Remember, the vast majority of believers, the vast majority of Christians are in Hades and have been in Hades for thousands of years. They're waiting for the resurrection. And Jesus is making a prophecy about the resurrection. He's saying those gates are not going to remain closed over them. They're not going to prevail. They're going to be opened. Remember when Jesus says, I have the keys of death and Hades. Remember that? And in Psalm 118, I don't remember. It's the one that talks about Jesus, the word of God, going down into the place of the dead, and he broke the brazen bars of the gates of Hades. He broke the gates and he led forth all the souls into the good place. That he led them to paradise. That's what the church fathers believe. They believe Jesus rescued souls that were in there who were not in paradise, and he brought them to paradise. And he promises them that they're going to all leave. Everybody's going to leave. Did you know even people that are not in Jesus' church are going to be resurrected? But his promise is especially for his church that he's not going to abandon them down there. He will not leave them in there. They will all come out. We could show you the church fathers saying that. We have a section on the website where John Chrysostom and Ephraim the Syrian and many others, all the big names, they say this statement is all about the resurrection. It is not about the church being invincible to apostasy. On the contrary, the church fathers explicitly teach it will fall into apostasy as time goes on, and they even believe that happened during the Arian crisis. Okay, let's let Max on. What do you say, Nolan?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Welcome to the stage, Max. Have we spoken to you before? You're live, Max. Can you hear us? You might be watching the stream, or you might be busy with something else. You're muted, Max. You're still muted, Max. But you're welcome, even if you're muted. We're not upset. I don't think we've muted you, have we?
No. Well, if you want to go ahead and put him back into like the queue, and then if he's ready, he can always, I think that in the private chat, he can message whenever he's back.
Yes. Well, anybody else is invited, but Max, you're on. Can you believe we've been going for an hour and a half? Time flies. Now, we're willing to pull up on the screen some of the church fathers' statements on these individual issues that the Catholics and Orthodox are heretical on. We're willing to do that. What would you guys like to hear us bring up? What shall we show to you? You know, the church fathers, for the first few hundred years of church history, 400, 450 years, they all say Mary was guilty of sins. They also unanimously say, for the first 500 years, without even one exception, all church fathers completely condemn the idea of bowing down to images, lifeless images, or offering them incense. They say these are the two things that God forbade you to do. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. Serving is offering sacrifices, and incense is a sacrifice. That's very clear in Scripture, and all the church fathers also confirm it. You cannot offer incense to blocks of wood. That's idolatry. Ultra Star Killer says, intercession of saints. Awfully Hot Coffee Pot says, let's do pacifism. You know, intercession of saints, I would say, is lower on the totem pole than pacifism. Pacifism is definitely more important. Whether you can go and kill, especially when you have Catholics and Orthodox actively engaging in killing, and always have for many centuries, going to war, or in the Catholics' case, I don't know how much this applies to Orthodox, but the Catholics believed it was their job to arrest heretics and string them up and torture them. They'd even do sexual kinds of tortures on them. They'd take like red hot poker sticks and stick them up the posteriors of men and women. They say this is what Paul commands in Titus when he says, reject a heretic after two warnings, first and second warning. Thomas Aquinas said, this actually means kill them. You reject them by killing them. That's what the Catholic Church believed. That was their official teaching. Heretics need to be tortured and executed. I mean, that's a pretty serious doctrine. That's murder. Catholics have a long history of that. They've never renounced it. They've never said that was a grave sin. That was a monumental sin we committed in executing heretics. And they're in so much trouble because they are heretics themselves, and yet they judge others with civil judgments, punishments, death, torture. Looks like Max was not able to join. Peter W. says, so your presupposition is that you can use something a church father says to debunk any doctrine? Well, you've got the order all mixed up, Peter. It's actually that we're obeying a principle laid down by the church, your church. Did you see Josiah Trenham in the Orthodox Church? I don't know if you're Orthodox, but even the Catholics believe in this principle to a certain degree. The Orthodox say, if you want to know which church is true, if you want to make sure you're in the true church, you need to make sure that your church is teaching what the original church taught. So before you even join any church, before we join any church, we're going to find out what all the church fathers taught from the beginning universally, meaning all around the world. And we did that. We're following the principle that your church laid down. Have you obeyed that principle, Peter? Have you done that? Have you done your due diligence and investigated it? Or have you just taken the word of your priests that they really do match the early church's teachings? So when we say that we're investigating the fathers and that we found the fathers condemn the Catholics and Orthodox, we went and followed this protocol that your church laid down. Your church says, we're the original church, and the way you can know that for sure is go investigate the early church's teachings. So we're being good boys. We went and did what your priest told us to do. By the way, what other method is there to know what is true? What Vincent says is actually common sense. It's so obvious. There is no other way to know that you're part of the original church than to go and look at history. Do you have some alternate method that we should be using that we're not using? We'd love to hear what we're doing wrong. If you think we're misinterpreting the church fathers, come up here, challenge us. In our experience, every time we get challenged by somebody or we challenge the Orthodox, it starts out with them saying, you're misunderstanding the church fathers. And then it turns into, oh, actually, yeah, you're interpreting that correctly. The church fathers are wrong. He's wrong. They're all wrong when they say Mary committed sins. They're all wrong when they condemn image worship. They're all wrong when they say there's going to be a literal 1,000-year millennium. Again, it's a lesser issue, but they make it a big issue because they condemn anybody who believes that. They're all wrong when they say women should veil themselves with a kind of burqa type thing. The church fathers all say that women should dress modestly and cover their entire bodies to protect their brethren and strangers from falling into lust. They say they should be completely covered from head to toe. That's what the church fathers teach. We had a recent debate with a true Orthodox priest on this subject. He got slaughtered because the evidence was so overwhelming. He had to take it back. He had to say that, he did a really bad job in that debate. He didn't just do a bad job in the debate. He's a liar. He's killing people, saying things like, this is a heresy. It's abusive for women to dress modestly. A man can't tell his wife to dress modestly. And if she does, she's oppressed. Go see what the church fathers say to you. They condemn you.
Let's respond to Panonsky's latest comment.
He says, I didn't quite understand you before. You don't have positive opinion on ecumenical council since they focus on unimportant things? Well, we're sure there is a right answer on the subjects that 5 of those councils spoke on, the 5 in between the First Council of Nicaea and the Second Council of Nicaea. We would say First Council of Nicaea and Second Council of Nicaea actually are extremely important subjects. One of them is whether Jesus was a creature or he actually is the creator of everything. That's a very important, essential doctrine. That I'd say that's the bedrock of our entire faith, is knowing who the Son of God is, knowing whether he's a creature like us or if he really is completely divine. And then the Seventh Council is whether we can worship images. So that's pretty essential. That's the question of idolatry. You better get the right answer on that one, or you're going to be condemned for eternity. But the other subjects about how many wills Jesus has, or whether his natures are combined, or whether he has a human or a divine soul, and all those little minuscule questions certainly do not affect anybody's salvation. You can be saved by having a very simple understanding of those things. You can say, I believe Christ is fully divine and fully man. And if you ask him, hey, does he have a divine soul or a human soul? You can say, I don't know. And you are not going to be condemned for eternity for saying that. You can say, I don't know, but I do know what I do know, and that's enough for me. I'm going to have a simple understanding of those things. The church always accepted a confession like that. They did not believe all the laity has to understand all those little details. Make sense, Panonsky? So 5 of those councils are really stupid. That is what we think. Really stupid, straining at a gnat and swallowing a camel. You could talk about those things in depth. You could discuss those things among yourselves in the church. But even that is a real disservice when you have huge issues that are going unaddressed for centuries. And we've given some examples. Are they seriously not going to rebuke Augustine for saying that it was actually just an angel in the Old Testament? How does that get brushed under the rug? How do they ignore something like that when they're going to emphasize that Jesus has a human soul and not a divine soul, which is what they officially ruled on? They even condemned people for teaching otherwise. You're going to condemn Apollinaris of Laodicea and Theodore of Mopsuestia and others who are considered very righteous men in church history, very well-respected bishops, and even defenders of orthodoxy against heretics. But you're going to condemn them because they got the wrong answer on whether Jesus had a human or a divine soul. But when Augustine says that's not Jesus in the Old Testament, he is not the God of the Old Testament, that's just an angel, you're going to say that is a completely superfluous subject. Are you serious? We see total hypocrisy. You get what we're saying? I don't think we're unreasonable. We see hypocrisy. And we get worked up. Have you noticed that? Because we care about the truth. We hate lies. We hate it that you guys have all been subjected to these lies. A lot of you have been brainwashed by these evil people. Peter says, I reject your presupposition that the church fathers are the authority for what true theology is. Well, Peter,
it's the whole point of the channel.
Maybe you should watch our YouTube videos where we lay down that principle from Scripture. Did you know we can prove that using Scripture? Did you know God is the one who appointed bishops in the church? And God appointed bishops in the church so that we would not fall into heresy. Let me show you. And if you don't have bishops in the church, you are going to fall into heresy. Let me show you Ephesians 4. Can you see my screen? In the scriptures, it says, Jesus gave some as apostles, some as prophets, some as evangelists, and some as shepherds and teachers. You know this is talking about bishops, because it says if anybody wants to be a bishop in the church, in 1 Timothy 3, if anybody aspires to the office of bishop, he must be able to teach. That's what he says. The teachers in the church are bishops. He says, God gave them. He gave this office of apostle and the shepherds and teachers for the equipping of the saints for the work of service to the building up of the body of Christ until we all attain to the unity of the faith. See, that's the goal. That's the final objective. We can all be unified in the same beliefs. And when we look at the early church, what do we see? They were all united. It's incredible. They're united on so many things, even little things, even little details. They are almost completely unanimous on. And it's so funny, whenever people are trying to show that the early church were not united, the examples they'll use actually prove the opposite. Because they'll be like, well, they disagreed on how old Jesus was when he died. Are you serious? So you're telling me on all the other issues like faith and works, morality, God's law, divorce and remarriage, the Eucharist, baptism, the divinity of Christ, free will, you're telling me all these things they've got total agreement on? Yeah, but they don't agree on when Jesus died. How old he was when he died. Are you serious? So I'm more convinced than ever then that they're unified. If that's the best thing you can come up with, we always challenge them, give me the best thing you can find. And they're like, okay, all right. And then they sit there and they sweat and they're straining for something like, okay. I thought of something. Okay. They couldn't agree on which day to celebrate Easter. And actually, in reality, they completely resolved that. It was one bishop who was going against everybody on that. And everybody rebuked him and it was resolved. So they just fail. This is so lame. We see the early church was united. Okay, and that's the purpose of bishops, according to Ephesians 4. It's to bring us into the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. And now listen to this part. As a result of what? Having the apostles and the bishops that Christ appointed. As a result, we are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by craftiness in deceitful scheming. By the way, am I actually sharing screens? No, I'm not. Boom, there's my screen. Here, I'm zooming in. Everybody see what I'm zooming in on? As a result, he says, as a result of having bishops, we are no longer to be children. He's talking about being an immature little child that doesn't know the truth. He doesn't know right from wrong. He doesn't know truth from falsehood. As a result of having those bishops, you're no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, meaning being totally confused by the trickery of men, by craftiness and deceitful scheming. Do you guys understand? Having bishops is essential to protect you from being tossed around by the myriads of heresies in the world. Do you like being tossed around? Do you like being confused and never knowing for sure that what you believe is true? Well, the scriptures say God gave the bishops so that you would be unified in the truth. You don't have to worry about that. See, guys, we have total confidence that we believe the truth because we're abiding by that teaching that was passed down in the beginning and was agreed upon by all the bishops. We would ask all of you, in Hebrews 13, Paul says, remember those who rule over you, who spoke the word of God to you. Then he says again, obey those who rule over you and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account. Who are they giving an account to? To God on Judgment Day. See, God is going to require that they give an account of all the souls that they were in charge of. Jesus talks about this in his parables all the time. The parable of the talents, the parable of the steward. Remember, he gives the parable of when he comes home, the master comes home and he finds out that his servants were beating their fellow slaves. See, Jesus expects them to be good teachers. Remember, James says, let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, knowing that as such, you will incur a stricter judgment from God, guys. God is the one who's going to judge you strictly if he put you in charge of his house, in charge of a congregation, through apostolic succession, and then you failed to fulfill your duties. So listen to this. Paul says, obey those who rule over you, talking about the bishops. I can prove that that is the bishops. And submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with grief, for this would be unprofitable for you. Kind of a veiled threat. You see that? He says, listen, if it turns out you guys were not submitting to your bishops, you did not obey those who rule over you, that's going to be replayed on Judgment Day. That is not going to be profitable for you. If it turns out you are always challenging the bishops, you're always saying, I think you guys have got all this wrong. See, guys, in the scriptures, we're given a protocol in 3rd John. We're given an example of a bad bishop, Diotrephes. Remember, John says, I wrote something to Diotrephes, he's the bishop, who loves to be first among them, but, he does not accept what we say. And then, in this passage, they go and appoint Demetrius to be the bishop instead of Diotrephes. There's a protocol, guys. If your bishop is teaching a heresy, or if you suspect that he's teaching a heresy, or if you see him practicing a sin, you're supposed to go and contact the other bishops. Just like we today, if we see one church father teaching something, and we're not sure if it's true, we're supposed to compare it to what all the other bishops say. Remember, the unity of the faith is the goal. Back then, if you thought your bishop was teaching something wrong, you'd call the other bishops to come investigate it. They send a letter or they go travel and they say, are you guys teaching the same thing? And those bishops would either say, yeah, that's what we all teach. Or they'd say, no, that's wrong. We're going to come over there and correct that. And they would depose an unrepentant bishop who's teaching heresy. That was the protocol. God put that in place. You even see it in the scriptures in 3rd John taking place when Diotrephes became a bad bishop. God has always had this safeguard in place. And people use the example of heretical bishops who fall away from the majority as some kind of justification for disobeying the majority. That's not going to fly on Judgment Day, guys. Just try that on Judgment Day. See what happens. God, I realized that I didn't have to obey all of the consensus of all the earliest church fathers that you put in charge of the church, that you said, obey those who rule over you, who keep watch over your souls, because they're going to give an account to God. I decided to disobey them all because some of those bishops became heretics. I see. Let's see how that goes. And God says, I do have a system in place where we get rid of the bad bishop. We remove him and replace him. That even happened in the early church. Did you ever notice what a wonderful system I set up that the apostles enforced? We even see the apostle John enforcing this. And you're like, well, I just don't trust the system. I can't trust the apostles. I can't trust you, God, because these are fallible men. Isn't that what they say, Nolan? They're fallible. So we don't have to obey. Really? Is that how it works? Is that how authority works? In the scriptures, it tells wives to obey their husbands. It tells children to obey their parents. But parents are fallible, right? Husbands are fallible. Well, I guess we just don't have to obey them, right? Is that correct? Is that the principle you guys follow? I think it is. I think a lot of you men that say this kind of thing, you've got very rebellious wives that disobey you all the time. You don't actually exercise any authority, and you're not respectable. You don't deserve their respect because you don't lead, you don't teach, you don't lead by example. You don't spend time with your kids. You send them off to public school to be destroyed by false teachers, or you send them off to some horrible denomination to be corrupted by some evil pastor. But in reality, you're supposed to be exercising authority. You're supposed to be the image of God in your home, and your wife is supposed to be an image of the church. You reject authority and you ruin your own life, but God is the one who invented authority. God likes authority structures, and he enforced it in the church. You are supposed to obey the bishops. And if you had lived at that time period when there were legitimate bishops, you would be required to obey that bishop. Whatever city you lived in, whatever the jurisdiction was of that bishop, you'd have to find out, hey, who's the bishop of this city? Who was appointed by apostolic succession? And you'd have to obey that guy. And if you thought he was teaching something wrong, you couldn't just rebel against him or go and make your own little congregation. You would have to go and contact the other bishops, verify if he's contradicting what they all teach. But God doesn't give us the authority to just disobey the consensus of the early church fathers. And there are many more scriptures that teach this. I'm giving you the tiniest little inkling. God says, I will give you your rulers in peace and your bishops in righteousness. He prophesies that in Isaiah 60. In Timothy, Paul says, the elders who rule well are to be considered worthy of double honor. See how they're ruling? They're ruling. That's a word that means they're in charge. Peter says the same thing. Therefore, I exhort the elders among you as your fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ, and a partaker also of the glory that is to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God among you. Remember that in Ephesians 4, it said God appointed the shepherds and teachers. We know the bishops are teachers. Well, guess what? They're also shepherds. He says, shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising the bishopric. That's what the Greek word. Exercising the bishopric, not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God, and not for sordid gain, like the Orthodogs who charge people money just to get baptized, but with eagerness, nor yet as lording it over those allotted to your charge, but proving to be examples to the flock. See, in the scriptures, these are the guys in charge. They're supposed to not lord it over us that they're in charge, but they do rule the church. That's why in Jesus' parables, he says, therefore, be on the alert. You don't know what day your Lord is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have been on the alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. Remember when Paul says the bishop has to be one who rules his house well and have his children under control? And he says if he doesn't know how to rule his own house, how will he rule the church of God? Well, guys, that's what Jesus is talking about here. He's referring to that. If the head of that house had known when Jesus was returning, he wouldn't have allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think he will. Who then is the faithful and sensible slave whom his master made ruler over his household to give them their food at the proper time? And what does the food symbolizes? Teachings. God has put certain men in charge of the church, and their job is to give the correct teachings. And they did that faithfully for centuries. The vast majority of them did.
I don't know if you've been looking at the chat, but
All
Peter
right.
has been responding to you. He essentially is just saying that the elders are just whoever happens to be your elder in your denomination today.
Okay, let me ask you something because I anticipated this. We've all been over all these dumb Protestant arguments, but I'm going to be patient with you, Peter. Now think about this. You remember when in Hebrews 13, I'm going to show it to you again. He says, "Obey those who rule over you and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account." And we just read the passage where it says, "Who then is the faithful and sensible slave whom his master made ruler over his household?" Okay, you can see that God is actually putting certain people in a place of authority, and he is going to make them render an account to him, whether they took care of their stewardship, whether they managed their household well. But what Protestants suggest is that there can just be these random people who declare themselves to be bishops in the church, overseers, elders, whatever, and that they have authority. Or if they're going to say that they don't have authority, then why should anybody obey them? You shouldn't. But they just claim to have authority. Yes, this is my calling. They'll say, I have an anointing. They love to say that. I have an anointing from God to teach. Okay, do you believe then that your bishop has true authority and that you have to obey him? Do you believe that, Peter? Do you think you just get to choose your own authorities? Is that how the authority structure works? I get to choose my own authority? That's the opposite of authority. If you get to choose who has authority over you, you're like, not that guy, not that guy, not that guy. That guy, he's in authority. Actually, never mind. Him. Is that how authority works? If you can choose your own authority, then that's not authority. They don't have any authority over you. You're just accumulating for yourselves teachers in accordance to your own desires. That's what the scripture warns you against. That's what you're doing. You're looking at like a buffet. You're choosing what sounds good, what tastes good, and you're taking that and eating it up. But you'd have to admit that if you're choosing who your own authorities are, then that person is clearly not a steward that God has put in charge of the church, who he expects other people to obey and whom God will require an account of. When it says God will require an account of that guy who he made ruler, it means that God is going to say, "Hey, did you manage that church well that I put you in charge of?" And by the way, what's the implication? If God put him in charge of the church, if he has authority over the church, then everybody in that church has to obey him. If he has a responsibility to watch over their souls, as it says, obey those who rule over you, for they keep watch over your souls. Well, then that implies they have authority. You can't have a responsibility to watch over all these people's souls, but not have authority over those people that you're ruling over. You see? So do you understand, Peter, why this completely contradicts your idea, the Protestant idea, of just getting to go around and find some YouTube preacher, some volunteered guy and say, I like this guy. He's good. I'm just going to obey him. It's completely antithetical. It's completely contrary to the concept of authority. If you get to choose your own authorities, and if somebody gets to declare himself an authority with no divine appointment or succession from the apostles. Does that make sense? Hopefully that was clear. Here in Acts 20, Paul says, "Be on guard for yourselves and for all the flock, among which the Holy Spirit has made you bishops to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood." So who makes somebody a bishop? The Holy Spirit. He doesn't make himself a bishop. You can't appoint yourself to be a bishop. You can't appoint other people to be bishops with your own non-existent authority. It has to come by apostolic succession. That's why nobody could claim that we are some kind of sect, because we don't claim to have bishops. We know that we don't have that authority. We're submitting to the authorities, and we're urging you to do the same thing, not to make your own sect. You know, one of the main purposes of a bishop is to learn from him all the doctrines of Christ. And you are able to learn those doctrines by studying for yourself. The bishops today can't be relied on to teach you the truth. They're going to lie to you, as far as we know. Hey, maybe there's some exception out there, but we don't see it. Not in the Catholic Church, not in the Orthodox Church, and not in any of the other Protestant sects. If you think that anybody does humbly submit to the unanimous teaching of the early church, let us know. We've never seen it. And what do they say? Why are the quotes on the website all password protected? And only the one on Mary. That's the only one that's password protected. There's only one. You must be very curious what the fathers say about Mary. Why don't you come up here, Burden's grave, and come talk to us? We would like to show you what all the church fathers say about Mary. They all say she committed sins, that she was guilty of sin, and that she actually committed sins. They say you can actually find it in Scripture. 4 places, even more. Jerome cites 5 places. They believe they're recorded in Scripture, completely contradicting the Catholics and Orthodox. Peter says, I don't think my pastor is random. I think he was called by God. I was led to my church by God. It was quite miraculous. My pastor has authority over me. My pastor believes that. Where did he get his authority? And does he teach what the church taught from the beginning? Or does he contradict them? Remember, that's the litmus test. That's the way to, that's the big question that you must verify. Snow Quilter. It is a woman. She says, I'm confused. How do you get a bishop? Well, like we said, we've got a lot of bishops already. We've got all the church fathers. They are bishops. And according to the Catholics and the Orthodox, whenever they convene a council, they always rely on the previous decrees of the early church fathers in their own individual writings. So that is the ultimate authority. The early church has authority over the later church. Remember that authority is received by succession. If you condemn the people that you received your ordination from, then you lose your own authority. You see how that works? The early church fathers have all the authority. They have to be submitted to. And God worked it out that we would have this early period, these first 3 centuries. It's a great way to kind of, cut it off and say, like, this is like the early church. It's nice. I don't know why, but God worked it out. 3 centuries. He likes 3s. And in that period, even the post-Nicene church fathers, they say that early period was the purest period in the church's history as far as doctrine and discipline goes. So we have a special respect for the Ante-Nicene church fathers. That's why we suggest you all read that period before you start reading the 400s and 500s and 600s, the writings of those fathers, the great-grandchildren of the church fathers. Start with the actual church fathers and move your way up.
Yeah, they're just the bishops that have that link to the apostles. So you have to verify that there is some sort of a tethered line that actually exists that's objectively can be proven. If that can't be proven, then there is no line that tethers the two together, and there's no connection. There's no succession at that point.
How did they become church fathers? She's asking, how do they become church fathers? Well, what we would say to that is there were bishops in all these different provinces, but not all bishops were known to be defenders of the faith against heretics in writings. Not all of them wrote big, long books like Irenaeus' book Against Heresies. They became very famous because of how effective and thorough they were at destroying heresies. So it's only natural that some church fathers would rise above others. Some would be greater leaders, more influential, and that their influence would reach more regions because of their writings, or just their great reputation, but especially because of the writings. And thank God for that, because if we did have all the preserved writings of all the church fathers who lived in all the first 3 centuries alone, that would be overwhelming for us to read. I mean, that would truly be an insurmountable task if you had to read all that. Who knows what that would look like if you were to have all their writings. So thank God that we only have the writings of certain very famous men. You've got like 30 or 40 in those first few centuries. That's a great number. It's not too big where it would be impossible to ever read all of that. You could easily read it all multiple times in your life. And it's also not so small that anybody would doubt that it really accounts for the worldwide church's teachings, the consensus and the universal teachings of the church. So it's a great sweet spot right in the middle. Not too many church fathers, not too few, just very famous, reputable men, many of whom were martyrs. And so we find that very useful that was preserved for us. That's the church fathers. It's those bishops who rose up above the rest and were known to be great defenders of the Orthodox faith. No. You ask, so only people who knew the apostles could be church fathers? No, we've never said that. The succession of church fathers, starting from the apostles, the succession of bishops and apologists have great authority when we find their writings to be preserved and copied and read in all the churches. And the churches say, yes, this represents what we believe as well. Copy this down, spread it around so that everybody can read what the church teaches on this or that subject. I also want to point something out that we don't necessarily talk about a lot. But in Ephesians 4, it says God gave the apostles and the prophets and the evangelists and the shepherds and teachers. It doesn't say he just gave the apostles and the bishops, but it also says evangelists. We should remember that because some of the so-called church fathers, those men who are very famous for defending the truth of the church's doctrines, they were not necessarily ordained, such as Justin Martyr. The church has great respect for Justin Martyr and other apologists like him. So you don't have to be ordained to be a church father. You simply have to be somebody that all the other bishops around the world had great respect for and whose writings were spread around the church and were known to be representing the whole world's teachings on that subject. And you can read books like Eusebius's Church History or Jerome's book called On Illustrious Men, where he talks about some of the most famous church fathers in history, most of whom we still have writings from. Make sense? And Peter says, are there any bishops today? Peter, if you can find one, that'd be wonderful, but we're not aware of any bishops that preserve the original church's teachings. They all deviate. The Catholics and Orthodox, for instance, have a total deviation in worship. They are Jewish. They are Judaizers. That's why the thumbnail says demon worship, Judaizing, murder. They are the ultimate Judaizers. They believe that the worship of the Old Testament has to be copied and practiced in the New Testament. They believe that offering God sacrifices, fleshly, carnal sacrifices, is still ordained in the New Testament, particularly with incense, even though all the church fathers in the first 500 years of church history completely reject that and condemn it. And they say, we don't offer incense. I wish I could get my audio because I could show you them saying that. Let's see if I can get my audio to work. 1 second. Are there any authentic churches today, Peter asks? We've answered that. You tell us. You tell us if you find any. We haven't seen any institutional churches that are obedient to the early church and consider them to be authoritative over the current church. On the contrary, they believe that the current church has the authority to override the early church on just about anything. And Burden's Grave says, is there any way to find your references with Mary? Yeah, I mean, we could show those to you. If you want to come up here, we could show them to you. We like to have a live person to show that to. Would you be willing to come up? This is always the dumb question people ask. So are you the only ones who have this right? How many of you share this belief system? I don't know. Did Vincent of Lerins, when he gave the Orthodox Church's principle for how to find the original faith, did he say, now, of course, if you can't find a lot of people doing this, then, of course, whatever you end up finding to be the case that the early church taught, just don't trust yourself. Don't trust that that really is what they teach, or at least just reject it. Because, if there's not a lot of people doing it, then you shouldn't do it either. With that logic, let's say there were a person who didn't live in one of your regions that has an Orthodox church. Let's say somebody living in Saudi Arabia or Brazil or Pakistan or China. Let's say they're living in China or North Korea where there are no Orthodox churches. Let's say they were to find the church fathers and read it and they find the truth. Should they just reject the truth since there are no churches around them? What do you think? I'm not answering the question, Peter says. He's not answering the question. I told you I don't know. That's my answer. But I do believe the church fathers when they say that the faith is going to be really hard to find on the earth when Jesus returns. I can look at the Catholics and Orthodox and see that they teach heresies, a lot of heresies, rank heresies. They made sure not to just contradict Christ on one or two issues, but they made sure to do on so many issues that no honest person could ever stay in their church if they investigated the early church's teachings. No honest person could ever be in the Catholic or Orthodox Church if they have read the early church fathers and obey them. This guy, the Swartley MC. Wow. He says, you said that bishops are here to protect us from heresy. When did this stop working? Well, you'd have to admit it definitely stopped working during the Arian crisis. There was a huge crisis in the mid 300s that lasted a little over 40 years, where, according to Athanasius and Hilary and others, and even others after them that weren't even alive during that time, like Jerome, Gregory of Nazianzus, they say all the bishops fell away. And the legit bishops who refused to become heretics, they refused to become Arians at the emperor's command. Constantine and his son Constantius required everybody to become Arians. They were exiling Athanasius and replacing him with a fake bishop, and they did the same at every other place that had a legitimate bishop. During that time, you had to leave the church if you wanted to be a true Christian. You could not convene with people denying the divinity of Christ. That was a very clear teaching from Athanasius and the other bishops who were exiled. They said, you cannot convene with those fake bishops. You get out of there. Go live out in the desert or the dens of the earth, they said. Go live in caves. But don't ever convene with those heretical bishops. We're following that command. So you're saying, how could this happen, or what are we supposed to do? We already have a precedent for this happening and a precedent for what we're supposed to do if it ever happens. Did you read Vincent? Should I put it on the screen again? Let me read it one more time for you. Let me show you what Vincent says we should do if the whole church falls into apostasy. We didn't come up with this. It's the Orthodox that tell us to listen to Vincent. We just showed Josiah Trenham saying, we follow what Vincent of Laren says. This is how to know that you have the truth. Vincent says, but what if some novel contagion should seek to infect? Oh, let me share my screen. Can you actually see what I see? No, you can't. Here we go. Can you see what I see? He says, what if some novel contagion, some new kind of sickness, should seek to infect not merely an insignificant portion of the church, but the whole church? He says, here's the answer. Then it will be his care, that's talking about you, it will be your care to cleave to antiquity, the original teaching, which at this day cannot possibly be seduced by any fraud of novelty. So he's saying in his day, we've learned our lesson. The church has repented of Arianism. He was living at a time period right after they all came out of Arianism. But he's saying it's your job, if you ever find the whole church teaching a heresy, it's your job to stick to antiquity, what was taught by all the fathers from the beginning. And he says it again. What are you supposed to do if you can't find any council teaching on a subject and you're not sure what the truth is? He says, then it's your job to collect and consult and interrogate the opinions of the ancients, of those, namely, who, though living in various times and places, yet continuing in the communion and faith of the one Catholic Church, stand forth acknowledged and approved authorities. And whatever you shall ascertain to have been held, written, taught, not by one or two of these only, but by all, equally, with one consent, openly, frequently, persistently, that you must understand that you yourself also are to believe without any doubt or hesitation. That's what we're doing, guys. You see how confident we are, that we know we have the truth. We don't doubt or hesitate to believe that what the early church taught is true. We're confident. We're convinced. If the early church was wrong, if all of the bishops from the beginning were wrong, then you can never know that you have the truth. You're in an ever-evolving church. One of the big problems with the Orthodox is that they don't think that evolution is wrong. They don't think protesting the early church's teachings are wrong. Their big issue with the Protestants isn't that they changed from the original teachings, but just that they changed in the wrong direction. They developed in a way they didn't prefer. The Orthodox say, nah, you should have developed in this direction. You chose those particular doctrines, faith alone or whatever. No. It's over here. This new doctrine. Mary's the Queen of Heaven. Mary's sinless. We got to offer incense to God. He wants us to go back to Jewish worship, even though the church didn't do that for more than 500 years. Now God requires it. You got to offer the incense. He wants you to bow down to images and offer them incense too, even though that was forbidden in the church for at least 5 centuries. It was condemned as idolatry. Now you have to do it. We can prove that. Anybody, come up here. We'd like to talk to you. We'd like to prove that to you.
And by the way, Peter, you said, so you guys are pretty much saying that all the churches in the world are false churches and only you guys have it figured out. You've already said that you disagree. You're not going to treat the church fathers as an authority. What we're saying, everyone is saying, everybody knows what the church fathers taught. Everyone just says we disagree with them. Your understanding of it is completely wrong. We're not saying that we have it figured out. We're just saying we're not going to disagree with them like everyone else. We think that they're right. We agree with them. We submit to them. Here's completely different from entering a completely new stimuli into the conversation, into the gene pool, we're simply just returning to exactly what was believed then. We're just accepting what was believed at the beginning. That's not introducing something new.
They're all like, why are you going with the early church, man? Why would you ever just listen to the early church? Like, what? Why would you do that? Well, what else are we supposed to do? What is your alternative? What authority do you think is greater than the unanimous teaching of the early church that lasted for 3 centuries? Can you tell us what that is? What's the better method to find the truth that we've missed somehow? Can you tell us what that is? The Swartley MC, you ask a legitimately good question, even though you're asking it rhetorically, you're not asking it sincerely. We are going to answer it sincerely. So you said what the early church taught was true, but the majority of the bishops fell into Arianism? That's a good question. How in the world did all the bishops fall into Arianism after Nicaea? But again, we get gaslit. We get beat up either way. If we say we believe that the early church was very pure for the first 300 years, and then the bishops had this major failure to reject the interference of the emperor, and instead they went along with it, and the emperor threatened them all and forced them to become Arians, or else they'd be punished or deposed, and they went along with it. Everybody's like, what? You think a whole church fell into apostasy? And we're saying, yeah, we do think that happened due to their weakness. But then the other people, they'll give us the opposite argument. They'll beat us up if we believe the complete opposite, and they'll say, you think that the whole church, my own brain is fried. We're damned if we do and damned if we don't. We believe that the whole church was faithful in those first 3 centuries. We believe it was pure. We believe there's a pretty massive event happening there with the emperor legalizing Christianity and interfering in the church. And we're told, like, you're some kind of weird conspiracy theorist. You think that something changed in the church? And we're saying, yeah, the Arian crisis. And then they're like, then they switch it and they're like, oh, so you really think the early church was terrible because they fell into apostasy? Okay, so we just can't win either way. If we prove what we're saying, we prove that we're not a conspiracy theorist, there really was a huge change that happened, then you're just going to start making fun of those bishops. And you're going to say, we shouldn't listen to any of them. You're like, no, the church was pure. Quit accusing them of falling into apostasy. And then we say, well, it's obvious it did fall into apostasy. And you're going to say, well, then they must not have been very smart. We're not going to ever listen to the church fathers. It's just so disingenuous. You're not even being serious. They were bribed. That's how it happened. Go read Athanasius' book, History of the Arian Controversy. He tells you how it happened. They were weak, cowardly men. They fell into apostasy. People can become apostate, guys. Even a righteous man can become an apostate. The church fathers say Judas used to be a really great guy. And none of you would deny that Peter was always a very righteous man, but he denied Christ. People can deny Christ, guys. And those bishops were scared into it. They were very afraid of what the emperor would do to them. They fell away. Yeah, that's what we've been telling you. Thank you for at least acknowledging that it happened. And what was I going to say? I was going to show you guys something. You were asking for some proofs. If nobody else wants to come up and talk, we might be wrapping it up soon. I've been going for 2 hours. I'm going to have to figure out how to have audio next time so that we can have some videos up here. How do I do this? Oh, here we go. Also share tab audio. There we go. There we go. That's how you do it. We're not afraid of the Orthodox and Catholics. We're ready to drown you in the early church's teachings, show what a complete contradiction there is between the early church and your church. We're willing to join your church. We're ready to join it right now. All you have to do is prove that your church's teachings match the early church. It's not an unreasonable demand. It is your claim that you are the early church. You've got Vincent of Lerins. You've got Josiah Trenham. Here, why don't we play Josiah since we've got audio working now? Let's see if audio works now. Here, can you hear it okay? Is it working? No?
You're not sharing screens.
Here we go. Can you see it now?
But still, yes. The principle is the same. They can't, for us, we follow the witness of the church as articulated by St. Vincent of Lerins. He says in his Commonitorium, he said that the way that you can know if your faith is the Orthodox faith, it's not by quoting scriptures. Every heretic does that. It's by showing that what you believe has been believed by all people in all places at all times since the time of Christ. That's how you know the tests of antiquity and geography. That's how you know, in fact, your faith is the faith once given to the saints.
Mm-hmm. So, well, that's what we're told to do. We're told to go and test it. You Orthodox are telling us. You Catholics are telling us you're the original church. You're citing Vincent of Lerins. He's saying we should go back and check with the early church. Okay, we did it. We're being obedient. Of course, we did it before you guys even told us because it was common sense. Who's not doing this? It's obvious that you should go and verify that your beliefs match the early church. You should be absolutely overjoyed that these writings were preserved for you and that anybody can read them online for free. Yeah, you should go read them. Well, guess what? We did it. We found out the early church condemns the Catholics and Orthodox on major issues. They condemn the idea of bowing down to images and offering them incense. They say that is idolatry. They condemn the idea of Mary being sinless. Actually, they just casually say Mary committed sins. All of them teach it. Now you guys teach the opposite. They teach that it's a sin to go to war and to kill other people in defense of your country or for any reason. Now your church says that's a good thing. Catholics especially, they surpass the Orthodox. But they both teach it. They teach that God wants to be worshipped with incense and with carnal forms of worship passed on from the brainless Jews, the Christ-hating Jews. The Jews have created their own religion at this point, but at that time they were just the most rebellious people in history, the childish, foolish Jews who God had to condescend to with a carnal form of worship just to get them to stop worshiping idols. The Catholics and Orthodox say, yeah, that's us. We're Jews. We worship like them. Even though the early church, not just early, but for 500 years, completely rejects the idea of having vestments, these fancy clothes, lighting candles, burning incense. And burning incense to images is something not even the Jews did. So they go beyond it. They are just total idolaters. We can prove that. If anybody is brave enough to come up here, we can prove that. We'll go talk to Jay Dyer, Mr. Peanut Gallery. Jay Dyer's response to iconoclasm is that he's been to first century catacombs where you can find Christian icons. Whoa. Why don't you come up here and debate that with us? We'd love to go over that with you. That's just so lame. It's so pathetic. I mean, are you not embarrassed to say something so stupid? We're talking about what the unanimous teaching of the church fathers is, and you concede the point that no church fathers teach image worship. You're like, well, we found some catacombs somewhere. I see. Made by whom? I don't know. What was their religious affiliation? Probably Christian, right? Probably Christian, probably. I see. How do you know that? You do know that there were lots of icon worshipers like the Gnostics who made images of Christ and the saints and bowed to them and gave them incense, and that's all condemned explicitly by the church fathers. So who made these images that you're talking about? I don't know. I just know that they existed. I see. So the existence of a practice is proof that it's the early church's teaching? You just find something, somebody's doing it, you're not sure who? Yeah.
And by the way, only the existence of a picture itself, not the actual proof that it was being bowed down to and offered incense.
Yes, and then there's that part. You can't prove anybody was bowing to these images or that they had a doctrine that God wants to be worshipped through lifeless images made of wood and plaster. That's the mode of worship that he requires of you. Where's that doctrine? Non-existent. So Peanut Gallery, your response is Jay's best argument, which we already know it's going to be his best argument. He's going to bring up something like Dura Europos or something. Well, they had a picture somewhere. I see. And what do the church fathers say about bowing down to images? Well, can we not talk about that, please? Can we not talk about that? Yeah. We will show you all the church fathers saying it, not just Tertullian and Origen and Clement of Alexandria. We've done those to death. You know, it's so satanic that the Protestants only quote from people that they know the Catholics and Orthodox have no respect for. Why don't we show you everybody? Why don't we show you Clement of Rome? Why don't we show you Ignatius? Why don't we show you Justin Martyr? Why don't we show you Athanasius, John Chrysostom, Hilary of Poitiers, Jerome, Basil, your favorite? Why don't we show you all the church fathers condemning image worship? And many more. What are we up to? 72 on the website? There's not one that teaches that bowing down to images is lawful, let alone required. Give us something better. What's your best proof, Peanut? You know, that's the first question. How do I join? He says he wants to join. Come up here. Somebody drop the link for him. Drop the link for Mr. Peanut. We're gonna be very gentle with you. We're not gonna be mean to you, all right? What's your best proof? Is that too much to ask? You know, what you have to give us is the unanimous teaching of the fathers, or at least the consensus, even if you're going to find one church father saying that God does want to be worshipped by bowing down to images. But, you know, give us a consensus. That's not too much to ask. You can do that on baptism. You know, I can say, what do they always teach about baptism? You're going to give me like 100 quotations, as you should. Or if I say, what do they say about the Eucharist from the beginning? What do all the church fathers say? You're just going to avalanche me with quotations from the church fathers, because that's really what they all taught. And if I say, what do the church fathers say about the divinity of Christ, or faith and works? You're just going to blast me with quotations. And then I say, what do the church fathers say about bowing down to images and offering them incense? And you're just going to go completely silent and say, okay, well, wait, there's a catacomb somewhere in Rome. Okay, it's only Rome, because Rome is the only one that has these pictures, these catacomb pictures. And you're going to say, I found it. I found some pictures on the wall. Okay, you have any proof that anybody was bound down to these things? No. What about burning incense to them? No. Do you know what their religious affiliation was? Do you know who the bishop was at the time? Or do you know if any bishop allowed these things? Yeah, we don't know who allowed it, because the church fathers don't seem to talk about this. Yeah, they not only don't talk about it, they condemn it. We know the Christians were not doing this. He's here. Peanut is here. Welcome. Mr. Peanut, are you Catholic or Orthodox?
Oh.
Can you hear us, Peanut?
I can hear you.
Excellent. Nolan, can you hear him?
Yeah.
Are you Catholic or Orthodox?
We're Orthodox, but since none of them were joining, as
Oh, bad connection, Peanut. I'm personally disappointed, because I want to hear what you're going to say, but it is a poor connection. Can you still hear us?
yeah, I can hear you.
You sound
I can
better
hear
now.
you.
Anyway, you were saying, can you give us your best evidence that the early church, or any church father in the first, say, 500 years of church history, believed that we should be bowing down to images of wood or stone?
No, I can.
Did you say no, you cannot? Not even one church father?
Oh, but I was coming in.
I don't think it's going to work, Luke.
Bad connection. I wish we could talk to you, Peanut, but you're going to have to pull over or something.
Thanks anyway.
But come on later.
I guess I'll have to leave.
We'll have another stream.
Yeah, maybe when I get in a better spot.
Well, you sound better now. Did you stop?
Yeah.
Okay, you sound pretty good.
Okay. Well, what have you heard from me?
Nothing yet. So you're Orthodox.
Yeah.
Did you say you're not?
I'm not. No.
Church fathers, or what?
I'm not Catholic or Orthodox, but since none of them were joining, I listened. I thought I might as well and give you the best argument, really. And I would. There's one guy who might have been Orthodox who told you to debate Jay Dyer, and I would be interested in seeing that. You got all your sources, but if you go to his video response to Redeemed Zoomer, 10 reasons I'm not Orthodox, or was it like 6 or 7 or something? But I don't remember. But if you go to that video, he brings up those early church fathers, research showing that they were in support of iconoclasm, that they didn't that they didn't
what? Was the last part? It cut out for 1 second. I've watched the video. I know what you're talking about.
You've watched the Redeemed Zoomer video?
I've watched both.
Okay, you've watched his response. I was just going to direct you to his response to that point, which where he talks about the nature of the catacombs that he was in. I couldn't remember off the top of my head like where and what backs them up. But if you want to just bring that on stream, you could respond to it.
Yes. Well, here's a philosophy to live by, because we Christians are philosophical. We live by principles. We don't just, you can't just get smacked in the face with some random piece of information and then change your entire religion. But there's a principle we abide by, which is whatever the unanimous or whatever the consensus was of the early church fathers, where they teaching all around the world from the beginning, whatever that teaching is, we abide by that. And when somebody admits that they don't have any church fathers teaching on that subject, and then they say, but I found some random pictures on a wall somewhere made by somebody, and I can't even prove that anybody was bowing to them, which is what my church teaches is a law, and it's required by God to worship him. When somebody says, here's some little piece of information, it's one thing against the church fathers, we have to choose between these two things. You understand that? You still have to make a choice. He hasn't taken away the choice. There's still two options. Which one am I going to choose? Which one are you going to choose?
Yeah,
Don't you see a huge difference, a huge disparity between when they're trying to prove a doctrine like faith and works or the sacraments or even Mary's ever virginity? You can find tons of church fathers saying Mary was an ever virgin, even on littler subjects like that. But on icon veneration, they just completely surrender and they say, well, okay, forget about the church fathers. I found some catacombs. And again, we know that the early church fathers condemned people who worshiped images. They said Gnostics did it. They can't even prove that the catacomb pictures that they have in Rome were made by the actual Christians, part of the worldwide church. They can't even prove that. They could have been made by Gnostics. We don't know. We know that there were tons of Gnostics in Rome. That was where it was strongest. It was one of the places where it was the strongest in the world. So nobody knows who made those things. They could have been made by Gnostics, but even if they were made by Christians, the practice of the laity does not define the doctrines of the church. The laity can do aberrant things. I can show you proof. I can show you examples of early Christians worshiping the sun, who would bow down to the sun, and they thought that, when they would face the east, that it was actually supposed to be sun worship. That's what it was all about, worshiping the sun. And they had to be corrected about that. So just showing that some Christian does something and trying to say, well, he did it, so now we know that's the official teaching of the church, that's utterly absurd. Do you see how crazy that is? If we were to do that, we could have any belief we wanted, because I can show you all kinds of Christians in history, all kinds of laymen having false doctrines.
Oh yeah, I 100%.
And you cut out again, but did you not have anything else to say?
Well, if I was like I was to but it would be I would criticize.
Bad connection. I'm sorry. It got bad again.
Okay.
Oh, you're back again, though. I'm sorry, Peanut.
I think we're going to wrap it up here, Luke.
All right. Well, you can come back, Peanut. We enjoy talking to you, but I didn't get to hear as much as I would have liked. But we'll see you again. All right, guys, we're going to bring an end to the stream. It's been going for 2 hours and 30 minutes. Hope you guys were edified by it. And we're looking forward to conversations in the future. Oh, Nika says, hi, I just arrived. Are you pagans? Well, please. No, we obey the unanimous teachings of the church fathers, many of which the Catholics and Orthodox share, but we don't bow down to images. We don't worship Mary as a sinless queen of heaven. We don't go to war. We don't allow divorce and remarriage. God has forbidden that. We don't practice that. Our wives and our daughters dress modestly, etc., etc. Things that the Catholics and Orthodox do not believe in. They let their wives and daughters dress like prostitutes with makeup and dresses exposing half their leg or more, and necklaces and jewelry and outrageous hairdos and all that stuff. That reason alone would prevent me from ever being part of one of these churches. Okay, we're going to see you later. God be with you all. Farewell.